Williams, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the Charlie Kirk Memorial. The reason I wanted to have you on is this was the first time I've ever seen about a 5 hour instruction of what the gospel is on Fox and other news stations. I thought it was amazingly compelling. I thought people were incredibly clear, but it was what was really striking about this is Charlie, though he understood economics and politics and foreign policy and everything else. He was a brilliant man. His main goal was to encourage people to find faith in Christ, to get married, to have kids, to contribute to the culture of this country. And that really was the majority of what was said yesterday. And it was incredibly compelling. But I just wanted to get your thoughts, just as a pastor, on the memorial yesterday.
Hey, Chris, always good to be with you. I think that in my lifetime, I don't recall seeing anything like that. And I'm not saying things like that haven't happened before. I'm just saying in my lifetime, I don't recall seeing, federal government officials, statesmen, making clear presentations of the gospel and the atonement. I heard one of our cabinet members talking about the atonement of Jesus. And so I think it's a remarkable thing. I think when you start looking at the thing as a whole, it's what many of us have prayed for so long, that the precepts of the gospel would penetrate into the leadership of our country. Now, I'm not making any statements about the character of our leaders or anything like that. I'm just talking about what was on display yesterday. Because when you look at Charlie's videos, and I encourage people to do that, don't just look at the clips. Watch his videos and see how clear he was on the gospel. I do think it was an honor to him to have the gospel on multiple occasions yesterday, to be so clearly presented. And so I hope, pun intended in what I'm about to say, but I hope this is a turning point in American history. I hope this is a turning point for us to recognize that in whatever ways that Charlie was brilliant, and he was, the main component of transformation, the main turning point is going to happen when we recapture a sense of who Christ is in our culture. And when we let the truth of Christ be the dominant factor in how we carry ourselves, because we have drifted so far away from that. And that's the very thing that Charlie was trying to reconnect us to, is reconnect us to our moral moorings, which are rooted in biblical truth. And so I was pleased yesterday. It was a very long thing. I did not expect it to be as long as it was, but certainly encouraged by some things that I saw.
Yeah, all of it was incredible, but I think they quoted Adams when he said, like, the Constitution was made for religious and moral people and is utterly unsuitable to the government of anyone else. And I think that we've seen that in the country. Whenever you have a Judeo-Christian ethic that the majority of people accept, even if not everyone subscribes to Christianity personally, they tended to subscribe to the ethics and philosophy behind it, and that only worked with a strong church. One of the biggest things with TPUSA is that they had a faith chapter, and the whole point of it wasn't to teach pastors how to be more political. It was more teaching pastors how to have an influence on the culture, on the things that people deal with every day, but from a biblical perspective. And I think that's one of the things that Charlie was, I think, well known for. Now, it's funny, his pastor said he didn't give speeches until years ago. He used to say they didn't want him to come into churches because he was too political. And he's like, well, politics is how humans relate to other humans, how we relate to our neighbors. Like, if you actually go back to the American Revolution, the people that were the most influential were the members of the clergy. It was the clergy that was encouraging people on. And that's why our revolution was so different from, say, the French Revolution, which was a godless pagan revolution. Ours was a God-honoring revolution where we tried to subscribe to the highest ideals. And I think that's what Charlie wanted. I think that's why he was obviously killed. But I do think that people don't understand just how important it is to have your society and culture in the right place. Because if you actually look at our debt, $37 trillion, it would be almost $0 if you had strong nuclear families, because people that have, moms and dads that work for each other's benefit and love God usually do not need a lot of government intervention outside of, roads and bridges, military, police, that kind of stuff. But the reason our economy, we're having so much debt and all these other things, it's really the cultural issue, because the majority of all of our dollars goes to people that don't come from, two-parent homes. And I think Charlie understood that if you're going to fix the economic issue, if you're going to fix the, the future of this country, you've got to deal with the heart of the issue, and that is strong families and people are moving away from faith. What are your thoughts on that, just as a pastor, and how important that is to the future of our republic?
Yeah, Chris, I think it's very important in the sense that when you look at any sort of nation state or empire from history, and you see, a bankruptcy or them kind of fall by the wayside economically, then you ask yourself, where does that begin? Well, that almost always begins with a moral bankruptcy, a moral decline, where a country progressively accepts more and more immorality, and they embrace immorality to such a degree that it corrupts everything. And I think we've seen that in our country as we look at spiraling debt for the national debt, we look at spiral individual debt, and that's because we have accepted as a people this ethos, this philosophy of judges, and each did what was right in his own eyes. And I think that has to be broken. I think we do have to get back to a sense of what is morally good and right. What is the best structure in society for a strong society? You cannot argue against family. Children from families that stay together are healthier mentally, they're healthier physically, they do better in school, they generally enjoy more success. I'm speaking in general terms. I know this doesn't apply in every single situation. So when we start asking ourselves, when is a nation its healthiest? Its nation is only as healthy as its family structure is. When you start taking dad out of the home or mom out of the home or shipping children off and breaking this natural institution that God built apart, it's easy to make a nation succumb to whatever you want it to, because you've taken away a lot of its authority structure, so it has to fold. And I think kind of getting back to that sense of saying, hey, this is not just a Christian issue, this is just a basic human issue, that we do better when families thrive. Countries do better, cities do better, we do better in our jobs, homes are healthier when families thrive. And so getting back to a space where we kind of support the family instead of trying to tear it down as a nation, it has to be at the top of the list. If we want to see any sort of transformation on a national level, or even move back towards something that's healthier, that's where we have to begin. Charlie understood that. Several commentators understand that in our present day. And I hope we as a nation can embrace that.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think that that's where he found his mission work to be, like, that it had to start with the church. Everything starts with the church, revival, all these different things. It's what he cared deeply about, because usually it was people. Most people don't know this, but the Great Awakening happened right before the Revolution, and even the people that wrote the Constitution, there says there would be no American Revolution without the Great Awakening, and so there is a divine interdependence upon, if you want to see reform in government or change in government, there's got to be a change that comes from the church. Edwards came before the writing of the Declaration of Independence. I mean, you see all these different things coming together. And I think right now, when you see the American church, it's you have good pastors like yourself. You got a lot of ones that are willing to take, off biblical stances. But I did see a poll that showed something like 66% of American pastors says they don't like to talk about controversial issues, which is literally like the entire Bible. I mean, I can't really think of a book that doesn't contain it. It seems like all this is pretty controversial because, God says there's one way, and one way that you shall be saved, and that's through Jesus, and all other ways are ineffective. That seems like a pretty controversial, serious statement. And that's really what we heard yesterday for 3.5 to 4 hours. It was 5 hours. They talked a little bit about other things, but literally, I think I clocked it. It was at least 70% of that was pure gospel presentation, and they didn't water it down. That's one thing I thought was amazing. Is like, hey, I figured they're just going to say some, like how politicians talk about Christianity in these vague terms, and no, they were talking about, like, look, Jesus came, he died so that we could be free. His death and resurrection were efficient only for those that repent and call him Savior. And it was truly amazing. And so I thought that, man, this is. I mean, I already went to church that morning and I went to Sunday school, but it was like an extra 4 hours of church. And for those that don't normally go to church, I think that's a really good picture of, like, you want to see churches that take those strong stances, and you want to see churches that truly are willing to do the hard things. But We're about to take a break here, but our next topic with Brad's going to be, I want to talk about what AOC said about Charlie after she voted to honor his life. This is some stunning stuff. We'll be back in just a second.
Recorded an amazing podcast with former Navy SEAL Jared Hudson, who now hunts down human traffickers. He's also got a personal story that involves a lot of overcoming and a ton of faith. So listen, I can't encourage you enough. Go ahead and sit down, make yourself ready for the Just Right podcast. In this case, with Jared Hudson. Yeah, let's do a show. 1, 2, 3, hey! Jared Hudson, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me, brother.
I'm glad to have you and appreciate you making time. So I'm going to do sort of an intro so folks know exactly who I've got sitting across the table from me right now. But so you're born and raised here in Alabama, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, born in Lynchburg, Virginia, and when I was about 4 or 5, we moved here. So, but yeah, pretty much born and raised.
So you're a
here.
carpetbagger. You came down from up north.
Came down from up north. Came down from just below the Mason-Dixon line now. So still
works.
Technically the South.
We'll take it.
Yeah.
Bottom line though, grew up to become a Navy SEAL. That was your career. Team 3, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, that's right.
Sniper qualified.
Yep, sniper.
You're also APO certified, Alabama,
Alabama
Police Officer Standards.
Yeah.
Certified law enforcement officer.
Yep.
Spent time in law enforcement, even ran for sheriff of the largest county in the state of Alabama, Jefferson County.
I was the sheriff runner-up is what I like to say because it makes me feel better.
You were actually the Republican choice. How about that?
There you go. How about that?
And I'll be honest with you, too. We'll talk about that more later. But as a longtime member of the Republican Party and a former elected official myself, I watched your race. And you were in a blue county running a red race, and you took him to the wire. And I think that says a lot.
Yeah, about 1%. And I lost by about 1.5%, I think, is what it came down to.
It was way close, and I think he was scared.
Yeah.
And he should have been. All right, there's that. You ran for sheriff. You love the Lord. You make no bones about it.
Only thing that matters.
Perfect. Which also leads me to you got a beautiful wife and 3 daughters.
I do, yep.
And I think those 2 are the crowning pieces of your resume.
They are, so I've got the wife, the 3 girls, and, obviously my faith first and foremost, even above them. Jesus says, if you don't hate your family, then you don't have a love for me. It doesn't mean that I actually hate my family because I'm called to draw them to Christ, but my love for him even supersedes my love for them, and my love for them is unbelievably great. I'd burn the world down for those girls, and so that's how I feel. So imagine what I do for Jesus, if that makes sense.
And you're trained to burn the world down.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, don't mess with my daughters because I'm gonna die trying.
I'm for that.
Yeah.
You now run, having spent time in the teams, you're out civilian world. You now run 2 companies, the Shooting Institute and Covenant Rescue Group.
Yep.
And we'll get into both of those in a minute. But I think suffice to say, your previous resume has translated well into what you're doing in the civilian world. It
has, yeah. The time in the SEAL teams is what prepared me, but also gave me, it's like the little bit of bait on the hook. And you still have to set the hook, but that's what gets people interested in who I am. Because SEAL, I'm just a regular dude like anybody else, but SEAL is a thing that people look at and they're like, wow, like you hear doctor, you hear lawyer, you hear politician, congressman, senator. Those things carry some weight because it takes something to get there, and I think that's what SEAL has done for me.
I think that's fair to say, and I think. There's never going to be a time in your life, I'm of the mind, that God doesn't plant something in your life with purpose beyond what you might have imagined it.
100%, man. 100%.
You also, apparently, like every other SEAL, you wrote a book.
Yeah, that's right. Now, all my other SEAL buddies say, "I didn't write a book, bro. You wrote a pamphlet. It's only like 50 pages long." But yeah,
it works. It publishes.
Yeah, that's right.
And you also, by the way, right here with Rightside, you're one of our podcasters.
Yeah,
you got the Liberty Minute podcast, comes out every other week for the most part. Yeah.
I told a guy told me, he said, "Oh man, you're that guy on the Liberty Minute with Phil Williams." I said, "Yeah, man, my name's Jared. Nice to meet you." "Oh, I know exactly who you are. I got one question though. Why do you call it the Liberty Minute? Because it's like 13 to 17 minutes every time." And I said, "Look, it's just a name, bro.
It's a euphemism, man.
It's just a name." So I thought it was pretty good though.
All right, cool resume. Let me ask you this. You got a beautiful family, amazing military record. You live large. How and I'm going to start off, I'm going to get philosophical right off the bat. So having said all that, those things, like on paper, I see it all. But how do you want to be remembered?
Yeah, no, I mean, the only thing that you should be remembered as is who are you in the person of Jesus Christ, because that's the only thing that lasts, right? Now, if I die right now, I'm going to be attached. I'm going to have a lasting impact, even in my death, on my wife and my girls. Possibly some of the people in my sphere of influence, possibly some of the guys in the SEAL teams I work with or in business or whatever. I might have a lasting impact. But oftentimes that lasting impact is not so much – it's not so much who you are here physically. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I really believe it's who you are in the person of Jesus Christ, because they look at it and say, man, that guy really.
You're listening to Rightside Radio. This is Chris Reed from the Daily Controversy, filling in for Phil Williams. He's going to be on CNN tonight with Abby Phillips. You guys could definitely check that out. We're going to have Pastor Brad Williams talking about today's events. We talked about the memorial yesterday, the 5-hour-long memorial. And the really stunning thing is that the Democratic Party, as a majority in the House, did not vote to honor or just the life of Charlie Kirk. This was interesting. So there was 58 Democrats who just voted no, like, we don't care. Like, we're not even going to honor his wife and kids that they lost their dad. And then 38 voted present. So I guess it's not as bad. And then 22 voted, they just decided not to show up because then they could avoid the issue. So the majority of Democrats either voted no or didn't show up or voted present. But when two Democrats died in Minnesota, 100% of all Republicans voted to condemn it. And I can give you about 100 examples of that. So you got one party that was willing to condemn all forms of evil, all violence, and one that not even half of them can come together and condemn the brutal assassination of a father and husband in front of his wife and kids, which I find to be horrible. Now, it says here in this article by Virginia Kruta, DW, the Democratic Party has lost more than 160,000 Democrats since the November election. It's actually got a lot more than that over the last 11 days. Former Senator Joe Manchin said that comments from Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez in the wake of Charlie Kirk's assassination were proof that the Democratic Party was getting worse, not better. Manchin joined CNN host Casey Hunt to discuss the current political climate, and she began by referring AOC's comments objecting to the congressional resolution to honor the recently murdered conservative, which we're not going to play all of it because it's just horrible. She does say that we should be clear about Charlie Kirk. He was a man who didn't believe in the Civil Rights Act, which is absolutely not true. And then she said a bunch of other false statements, which I'm not going to really repeat because it's all duplicitous lies, and she can say whatever she wants, but I'm not repeating them. And Pastor Williams, to me, it just seems like the Democratic Party, not only is this a really stupid thing politically, but it's a real problem morally. If you can watch a 31-year-old get brutally assassinated and you can't even bother to give some vague words of support and condemnation of the murder. And again, that's the majority of Democrats did not vote for the resolution in the House. What are your thoughts on that? Is this just proof the Democratic Party has gone over to the dark side that may be well beyond finding anything normal?
Yeah, maybe, Chris. This kind of gets to the heart of things that you and I have talked about on the Daily Controversy before about the tribalism that, we kind of segregate out into our tribes. And when you see things like what AOC said, where she's just so given to her tribe that she can't even honor a man who, though he was different from her, stood on principle. And even when you have guys like Van Jones at CNN kind of advocating for Charlie Kirk, saying we disagreed on everything. We were not friends, but I have respect, because he was trying to draw people into a conversation. Chris, it's not too dissimilar from, biblical times, really. When you start thinking about the way in which Jesus was accused, so often his accusers took snippets of what he said to make him say something that he didn't actually say. And you can find those reels on Charlie Kirk, in spades on the internet. Just clipping out things that he said to try to make him say something he didn't say. And this is where I encourage people to go listen and watch to whole conversations. And that when we have people who are our representatives who stand on the floor and who dishonor a man, but then we won't even acknowledge or honor him because he was shot, assassinated, trying to have peaceful conversations, where have we come as a country? Well, it just smacks of the lack of sanctity of life that is so prevalent in our midst, that we devalue life to the point that we're willing to not even honor a person who was shot brutally in front of his wife and children, because he was trying to have a conversation. This is what happens when we live in a culture where you dehumanize and you demonize people. This is what happens when we live in a culture where we say life isn't sacred. And if we have a political party who's pushing that agenda, it's time for common sense Americans, people who do see life as valuable and life as sacred, to stand against that nonsense.
Yeah, but my thoughts are this. I mean, the Democratic Party, 100% of them voted against protecting the safe spaces of women, both in sports and in the privacy of their locker rooms, bathrooms. They're openly supporting the chemical castration of kids ages 11, 12, 13, 14. They also they're on the wrong side of sex changes for minors. The Democratic Party, virtually all of them, I think, except for, I want to be fair to two of them out of like 280 in Congress and Senate, they are for state funding of abortion up until birth, including late-term abortion. And so, like, if your party's for those things, if you're for, you have no value of life in the womb, no value of life when it comes to like giving kids drugs that will cause infertility. No value of life when it comes to, well, I guess, somebody on the other side gets assassinated. Is that surprising that if your party supports all those things that the people running it would be callous, though? I mean, that seems like, I don't know. It seems like what you would expect, isn't it?
Yeah, it's exactly what you'd expect. It's exactly what you'd expect when you have a party that does consistently vote to devalue life, that does consistently vote to mutilate children, that does consistently vote and uphold a right to kill children in utero, and even at to the point where they're fully developed, the right to kind of, have euthanasia and all these other things that have been advocated by that party. And so when you start looking at these people who are callous towards life at every stage, whether it's in the womb, whether they're children, whether they're aging adults, it's like, it's not a shock. And so people shouldn't be shocked that when we decide that we don't want to honor someone's life because they're not a part of our tribe, they're not worth honoring. Well, this is just consistent. This is consistent with their view of life as a whole anyway. And it's kind of like people are useful to us insofar as they remain useful. If they are a burden, if they're an obstacle, if there's someone we don't like, they're expendable. Their life isn't valuable. And Chris, that's dangerous when you have that type of mentality at the highest level of leadership in your country.
Yeah, I think it's dangerous. And the party's just gotten to a kind of a dark place. The European socialist parties are not that different. They've kind of all gone here. I really think we have to understand, like, if you're not going to have general respect for life or the life of the womb or life in general, you just shouldn't be that surprising. But if you actually look at the Democratic polls, AOC is top amongst them, which is very interesting. You got Mandami, who's even worse. So I think the Democratic Party, hopefully they'll do what they did in '93 and sort of have like a center-right revolution. I don't know if that's possible right now, but I certainly think that if the Democrats stay where they are, they're going to get destroyed in the midterms and the general whenever that comes up next year, then 2 years from now. All right, we're going to take a quick break. We got a lot more coming up with Pastor Brad Williams.
He really was who he believed in. Does that make sense? So it's and I believe it's in James. He talks about, I'll show you my faith through my works. That's not a works-based salvation. Right. He's not saying that I'm working my way to heaven. I'm not doing X, Y, and Z, and that's going to get me to heaven. No, he's just saying, I have faith and I believe in Jesus, and because of that, you're going to see my fruits. My fruits are going to show that I believe in Jesus. Now, there's another aspect of that without getting too far off on this, topic. You hear a lot of people say, "Oh, I let people see who Jesus is through how I live my life." Right? That's what I don't necessarily tell everybody about Jesus, but they get to see who Jesus is through how I live my life. Well, that's not good either, because Paul says, "How will they hear if they don't have a preacher to preach?" So there's two aspects to that. There's one, what I say. Right? Scripture says a freshwater spring doesn't produce salt water. What I say is unbelievably important. But then once I say it, it's my actions that back it up. It's words, then action. And we see that with God. John chapter 1, in the beginning was the Word, right? Wasn't in the beginning was the action, was the creation. No, in the beginning was the Word was God, the Word was with God. And then all was made through him and by him, and without him, nothing was made. We see that in John chapter 1. First was the Word, what he spoke, what we speak. Then second is the actions that back up what we speak. And ultimately see in John chapter 4 or John chapter 1, verse 14, the Word became flesh and dwelt among men, right? And we see that in Isaiah. He says, I was amazed. God was amazed that there was none who could stand before him. He's talking about when he was drawing the plan to create the world. None could intercede for man. So he said, I'll take up my own strong arm of salvation. So God says, I'm going to make a world where sin is possible. I'm not going to make them sin, but I'm going to give them the option. And guess what? I know they're going to choose sin. And there's none that are going to be able to stand before him, but I'm going to make a way out of sin. And it's going to be through me. That's what God says, and that's who we should be.
That's
so
1
the lasting
10:13.
That's right. So that's a lasting impact. The lasting impact is when I die, when I'm gone, when anybody looks, was Jared Hudson, was his actions, how he raised his kids, the husband he was to his wife, how he was to his friends, the guys he went to war with, the guys that he worked with here, stateside law enforcement. Did his actions match the words that he said? And those are the two important things. So when I'm remembered, I want to be remembered as a guy whose actions matched my words, because ultimately that should, as a Christian, that should give not honor and glory to me, that gives honor and glory to God. That guy really was who he believed in.
I think that's awesome. And let me ask you this, because I'm going to chase a rabbit for a minute. I just heard probably 5 times in the last couple of minutes you quoting scripture. So, like me
loosely quoting scripture.
Okay, it wasn't too awful of a paraphrase, but most of it was pretty accurate.
Yeah.
And also when you said that, it would click verses in my mind. I think I responded back a minute ago, 1 Corinthians 10:13.
Yeah.
So I'm a firm believer in memorizing scripture. My personal, I call it my life verse, is Joshua 1:8 and 9. And it says, this book of the law shall not depart from you. You shall meditate on it day and night, so that you may do what is written in it, and by this achieve prosperity and success. So let me ask you this. Is the memorization of scripture something that's happened just because it was ingrained over time, or do you have a deliberate attempt on a regular basis to put it to memory?
Man, I just read it, if I'm being honest.
And it sticks?
Yeah, just read it. What'd you say?
Does it just stick? I mean, when you read it, does it stay?
Stick? Yeah,
or do you intentionally try to memorize it?
No, I don't intentionally try to memorize it. It's just I think it's just the natural outcome of reading the word. You can, and when I was a kid, we did Awanas. I think it was what my dad. Yes, we did Awanas. Not far from here. Rainbow.
Hey, all you Rightside ruffians out there, you are listening to Rightside Radio, solid conservative, just plain right.
You're listening to Rightside Radio. This is Christopher Reed from the Daily Controversy, filling in for Phil. He's going to be on CNN tonight with Abby Phillips. You guys definitely check it out. I can't wait to see him. We got Pastor Brad Williams on the line. We were talking about the memorial, all the things going on. One of the things that I got so much traction on social media from just really was the reaction whenever Erica Kirk said she, quote, forgave her husband's assassin. Now, Brad, I think a lot of people that aren't, let's say, from biblically orthodox churches, forgiveness does not mean the abandonment of consequences. Like, the best thing that could happen to that shooter would be is if he's found guilty, if he's sentenced to death, because honestly, like, sometimes it's the consequences, falling to the lowest point. That's often the time when people will actually come to realize the weight of their sins and maybe hopefully repent. You certainly hope that for everyone. But I did want you to talk just as a pastor. I think it's great. My mom, before she passed, she used to always tell me growing up, like, unforgiveness is the poison you drink trying to harm another. And that's very, very true. But I think what Erica Kirk was saying is, like, I'm leaving this to the Lord and to the state. I'm not going to wake up every day worried about revenge. But what are your thoughts on that, just for the people that may not have understood what she was trying to get at?
Yeah, Chris, I think that because of the atonement of Christ and in that mentioning that Jesus dying on the cross and accepting the wrath of God, in our place, condemned in our place he stood. One of the radical things that does for believers in him is it gives us this outlet where we no longer have to stand as judge, jury, and executioner over other people, because Christ has done a work at the cross where any person who repents and believes in him can find forgiveness. That is wildly liberating for us, because unforgiveness is a poison. It leads to bitterness, it leads to resentment, it leads to vengeance, it leads to vindictiveness, it leads to all sorts of other things. And so as believers, we have this really, really neat, liberating pathway to the Lord to lay our burdens on him and allow his justice to reign. You say something absolutely correct. When we extend forgiveness to someone, it in no way, shape, or form means that they are liberated or freed from any sort of consequences for their actions. It simply means that we as individuals are not going to hold them in our debt any longer. We're not going to allow them to occupy space in our minds and hearts. We're going to give them over to the Lord. And that's essentially what she's doing. She's allowing the justice system to do its thing, and for him to do, for him to be accountable to the law for what he did. She's just saying that he is no longer going to fill her mind and heart. She's releasing him to the Lord. And I think if everybody could learn to do that, the world would be a much better place.
Yeah, I think forgiveness just starts with acceptance. Accepting that, part of it is like you can't undo what has been done. Like no matter how angry you are and all these different things, it's not going to change the outcome. You certainly can be glad that the state will do exactly what it should do. They also said that they quoted Romans 13, the state does not bear the sword in vain. The sword is meaning like capital punishment. And it's supposed to punish evildoers. And that's like a good thing. That is a moral good. The more evil is punished, the less evil you generally get, because when people don't have a solid moral core, the only thing that's going to stop them from doing evil is fear of consequence. And so one of the reasons why Trump is so extremely strong when it comes to decreasing crime, whether it's DC, he's coming to Memphis, I think he'll go to St. Louis, Chicago. He wants to show everyone that, hey, we're not going to just let you murder American citizens. We're not going to let you destroy cities. We're not going to let you ruin some of the greatest cities on earth. We're going to come in there. We're going to punish people that do evil. We're going to give them the maximum sentence, and we're not messing around anymore. And a lot of people think that that's bad, but isn't it? I mean, you have two options, right? You can either be cruel, you can be, let's say, harsh on those who commit crimes, or you can be harsh on the victims of crimes, but you're going to be harsh on one of them, right, Brad?
Yes. There's always a price to pay. Either the victim pays the price or the perpetrator pays the price. And nowhere in Scripture where Christians, you and I as individuals, are called to extend grace. We're called to be humble, and we as individuals are called not to return insult for insult, but to turn the other cheek. People love to quote that verse, Chris, and try to apply that to a geopolitical secular government. In no way, shape, or form has the government ever been asked to turn the other cheek. The government has that prerogative. The government has the prerogative towards leniency, but laws govern a land, and those laws are meaningless if those laws are not enforced. And so when a government is enforcing the law and enforcing the penalty for, violating the law on people, that is the most gracious thing you can think of. Now, people can do that evilly. They can tyrannize people and go further than the law permits. But what we need is a nation of laws that governs people by said laws, so that when those laws are broken, there are consequences. And those consequences help the victims of the crimes, and they also help future victims, because they're meant to be a deterrent. It is the most gracious thing that the magistrate, that is the local authorities, the federal authorities, can do, is to enforce the laws properly. And that is good news for victims. That's good news for citizens. That's good news even for lawbreakers who might learn from their deeds. And so when we start looking at this, it is the most righteous, gracious thing we could do to enforce laws, and so that people who are victimized by criminals have a recourse and they're not just left to themselves.
Yeah, and it seems like this is obvious. I mean, the left really had this big thing like, oh, we need to rehabilitate. I'm like, well, if people are serving time, we should try to help them, maybe think about not doing it. But I think some of that comes to like having some sort of spiritual classes there. And there's a lot of different things you can do to rehabilitate. But really, the purpose, you want to punish crime. Like punishing sets an example the death penalty especially. And it seems like the left wing and the Democratic prosecutors, the Soros types, their whole idea was that if you go easy on criminals, somehow there's like a magic way you're going to get less crime, and in every case, you get more crime. Like the only way that they can show there's like, oh, there's a drop in crime. Well, they don't report crime statistics. Like police fudge the numbers. You're like, oh, crime's down. Well, yeah, I mean, crime's way down if you don't actually record crime. Like, that's a great way to do it. It's like if you, you can show that you've lost weight if you rig the scale, right? It doesn't mean you actually lost weight. It's the same thing that we're doing there. So it seems like the easiest thing to do is you look at some of these left-wing Soros prosecutors. We saw where crime went way up. Police officers decided they didn't want to serve there because they're getting no backup. And to me, it's almost like, why was this ever a debate? Like, why was there even a debate that if you are soft on crime, you're going to get more crime? It's almost to the point where, like, if you tax something, you generally get less. Like, yeah, that's why we tax cigarettes very, very high, because we want less people to smoke. Less people do smoke since they've had higher taxes and all these different things. But if you want more of something, you want to subsidize it, right? Like you subsidize it. And that's what we're doing with crime in these big cities. We are subsidizing crime and we're getting a lot more of it. And it's the craziest thing too. And I think this must be a spiritual thing as well. When you try to talk to a liberal about this, like a real left-wing radical, no matter what the facts are, no matter what the data is, it's like it goes right past them, because in their minds, they really truly believe that not punishing crime somehow gets you to less crime. What are your thoughts on this, Brad? Is it just like, does this take a suspension of reality? Because I've done this before, and it's almost like I'm talking to a child, but not like. And even though the person in front of me is college educated and understands the world otherwise well, but when you talk to them about basic facts, it seems like they escape them. Why is that?
Yeah. Why is that? That's a great question, Chris. I would love to know why that is. I would love to know why in the history of humanity where just carte blanche leniency ever made problems of crime go away. It doesn't. Now, is there room for nuance? Absolutely. Is there room to look at a case and decide we want to be lenient? Yes. But if you're going to tell somebody with a straight face that really, if we just relax the laws, people will do better. It's like people are wired by their flesh and by sin to take what you will give them and more. And so if we relax the laws, people will continue to go for broke with this stuff. It's just so, Chris, it reminds me of growing up. Of course, the liberal agenda was always education. If you just educate people, they won't do it. Well, it didn't work in the Say No to Drugs campaign. That didn't work in the Say No to Crime campaign. All the education in the world doesn't change anything. What really changes things is if there are penalties for behavior. Because when people understand that this is going to have a consequence, so now there's something that they have to account for, something that they stand to lose, usually their freedom or sometimes their lives. And I think that because of the way the human heart is wired, which is wicked, that's the only thing it understands. Of course, we get back to this is why we need a transformation and revival in Jesus Christ. But when it comes to laws, if we relax laws, people are going to flood our borders. When you reimpose law at our borders, it's amazing. The borders are a little bit more sane and not so crazy. Basic human experience teaches us this fact, and people are trying to suspend that. It makes you wonder what their motives are.
Yeah, it's really what I've thought about the left, and we've kind of talked about this. It really is more of a religion than sort of a political philosophy, because like you have to suspend rational behavior and rational thought and a simple understanding of how like rewards works or consequences worked. And I think that's something that we need to get back to. One of the things that we've seen since the death of Charlie Kirk is there's been a revival of a consequence culture. Meaning, if you openly cheer on the violent murder or call for more violent murders of, Charlie Kirk and his his remaining family, people are going to not want to work next to you. They're not going to want to. Their bosses don't want to work with somebody. Like, why would you want to work with someone that is openly advocating for murder, like violent murder of innocent people? Nobody wants to do that, and people don't realize like you're not like you have free speech, meaning the government's not going to come in and take you to jail because you celebrated the murder of someone. but doesn't mean you're going to keep your job. And I think the frustrating thing is people don't understand, like, yeah, we have free speech, but free speech equals you still have consequences for saying things. Like if you tell your boss to go pound sand and you hate them, you have the free speech to do that, but they're probably going to fire you. And the same thing we kind of saw with Jimmy Kimmel. And that's what I want to talk about in just a second. We're about to take a quick break. And just so we remember what Jimmy Kimmel said, he tried to pin the entire death of Charlie Kirk on MAGA, and now he's whining about it like a little child because he got tossed by Disney. Back in just a second.
Baptist, right up the road here. And so we would memorize verses as a kid that would stick, and having a dad that was a pastor, my parents they never forced us to do anything, but we would read scripture, and we'd read it as a family. And I think all my brothers and sisters do the same thing. We spend time in our Bible. It's a part of our life because it was ingrained into us at a young age.
Yeah.
Proverbs says, train up a child in the way they'll go, and when they're old, they won't depart from it. And so I think there's an aspect of that to whoever I see it with my daughters, with my girls. We'll do memory verses, and we'll read stories, and we'll do Bible stories at night before they go to bed. So I do believe that's important. However, my parents' faith is not my faith. My parents' faith is not what's going to get me into heaven.
Perfect.
My dad's faith wasn't my mom's faith. My mom's faith wasn't her kid's faith. So we have our own faith in the person of Jesus Christ. So I do believe that you can't always lean on your mom and dad if they were Christians or if they were not Christians. You're going to answer for what you do. And what does that mean? When I say what you do, how do I transact with the person of Jesus Christ? Faith is not a work. I can have faith in the person of Jesus Christ and accept what he's done for me on the cross, or I can do what Pilate does, wash my hands and believe the lie that I'm innocent of this man's blood. So there is an aspect of you that is involved. Does that make sense?
There is.
Now, me being involved for just who I am, and everybody's different. Some people might write it down. Some people might memorize it. I would go on deployments, and I would just write because I could memorize better writing. I'd start in Genesis you're on a 6-month deployment to Afghanistan. If we weren't opping, we're watching movies. I can quote movies and all that, and my wife drives her crazy. How do you know these movies? I'm like, we watch tons of movies on deployment. And I would write just word for word, just what I was reading in my Bible. My granddaddy told me, he said, hey, read a Proverbs a day and it will make you wise. And I gave him, before one deployment, I gave him a Bible I had when I was in high school. I think the only thing I ever read was Proverbs. I'd read Proverbs a day and I would annotate it. And I gave it to him, and literally it was all marked up. And I said, I read a Proverbs a day. And he said, well, that's good, son, but I didn't mean only read Proverbs. You ought to read the rest of the Bible as well. So there's that aspect too. We pick the things that we like. And I've learned that over time. And now I do the Bible throughout the year in about 10 months. It takes me to go through the whole Bible.
Yeah. So let me ask you,
it sticks.
It does stick. Yeah. And obviously I would say you definitely had some intentionality attached to it too. But let me ask you this. Has there been a time, and I'm really chasing a rabbit right now, but has there been a time, because God's word never comes back void.
Yeah.
Has there been a time when you were in the thick of something and a verse came back to you that you hadn't even thought of for a while, and it just like, wow, I needed to ponder on that for a minute?
Yeah. So I don't know if it's one that I'd never thought of for a while. I'll use a training example. A lot of times I hate Bud's training examples because a lot of guys that just tell Bud stories is because they have no war stories. That's what I've learned. They've never killed anybody or, actually been in combat. So the training stories I'm not big on, but this is one where this would apply, I guess. There was a Master Chief, and I believe his name was Guild, Master Chief Guild, if I remember right. I'm probably getting it wrong. I could text somebody and see. But either way, he was doing a program. He was part of a program where he would mentor Bud students as they were going through. They were trying to get numbers up because training was pretty much the same across the board. Standard the same. The percentage was the same. They increased Bud's classes. We had 366 start with ours in class 264, and 32 actually graduated SQT and got a Trident, right? So, you're looking at less than 10% by the time you get selected to go to a SEAL team. And then once you get there, now you've got, sniper school. We lost 60%, 40% of us graduated and became snipers. And these are all SEALs, right? So we lost 60% in sniper school that had to go back to a team and didn't get sniper quad. You lose like green team, selection for development group, what everybody refers to as SEAL Team 6, Special Mission Unit. Those are all SEALs. A lot of them good dudes, but you'll also lose 60% of those, and 40% of those guys will become Special Mission Unit SEALs. So there's always a selection process where there's an attrition rate. Make sense? And they're trying.
Well, there should be.
As it
If
should
it was
be.
easy, everybody do it, right?
Exactly right. But what they're doing is they're trying to increase those numbers because we need more SEALs, we need more snipers, we need more guys screening for Special Mission Unit.
Right.
Because of the way the war was going at the time. This is 2006. And he was going through buds with us, and he would meet with students and he would say, "Hey guys, look, this is what people do." He would go to the NFL, go all over the place and figure out what mindset things, and all kinds of stuff. He'd bring it back and try to present it. And he said, every warrior across, the all of history, all of the planet, all of history had a mantra. They had something they held to, something they.
You're listening to Rightside Radio. This is Chris Reed from the Daily Controversy. We've got Pastor Brad Williams on. Well, we're going to have to change the segment topic because in the break, I just found out Kimmel's show will return tomorrow night, which to me, I don't understand this. I mean, look, supposedly maybe he'll apologize, but we know he wanted to double down. We already know they're losing millions of dollars, between 30 and 60 million a year. I don't really know. Like, personally, if he's on ABC late night and he gets, I don't know, less than 1 million viewers, I guess it doesn't make that much of a difference. But to me, it's kind of like we're showing people like a lack of consequences. And that the thing that we were finally seeing with Charlie Kirk is that there are consequences. Now we're showing people that I guess if you're high up in media and you're a left-wing activist and you're related to, I guess, you're part of a corporation, you can get away with basically whatever you want to do. But I want to get your thoughts on this, Brad. I know this is kind of like changing the perspective of what I want to do the segment on, but what are your thoughts on this? It just seems like this is a total reversal from Disney, but Disney's disappointed me for a long time right now, so I guess I shouldn't be surprised.
Yeah, Chris, it is a disappointment because I mean, when you look at the reason they canceled the show, certainly because of his comments, they were insensitive and just flat out lies. But two, it was a business decision by a private company, and however many people wanted to frame this as a First Amendment issue, a censorship issue, the numbers just didn't add up. But the only thing I can come to is that lawyers were in back rooms talking and making deals, and who knows what went on. But it just goes to show that the media is a machine, and the machine is going to do whatever the machine wants to do. And people vote with their feet, and I hope that people continue to vote because Jimmy Kimmel isn't funny. I could stand it if it were actually funny, but it's not even funny. It's just political propaganda. That's all he does. And so when you look at decisions like this, it should just remind us of the world we live in, Chris. I mean, Disney is not going to hold him accountable, not the same way that they tried to do Trump. Do we remember the whole misinformation and disinformation and Twitter banning him and trying to get Facebook to ban him and banning him from this and banning him from that when they were just accusing him of misinformation? And now when we have it, it's just kind of a slap on the wrist. We made everybody happy. That's really what this feels like. We made everybody happy. Now we can go on with business as usual. But I hope people will vote with their feet on this.
Also, there is a story today, which we will definitely, we'll talk about it later. But, there was somebody that attacked an ABC studio, violently attacked, I think fired at ABC affiliate by a left-winger because the network pulled Jimmy Kimmel. Now, what I'm worried about is, did ABC decide to bring him back on the air because somebody had taken shots at one of their studios and they were getting death threats? Because to me, that's the exact opposite of what you should do. You're literally giving in to terroristic threats. I'm not saying that's what happened. I'm just telling you there was a story that was by Daily Wire, Fox covered this as well, where somebody shot into an ABC studio because they were upset about Jimmy Kimmel. And now we get the news that, he's going to be back tomorrow night. One of the worst things you can do is negotiate with people when they're using violence as a means to achieve an end. And again, maybe this deal was made or was in negotiation long before this incident. Maybe they're not related. Who knows? But the fact that there were shots fired by someone that was a far leftist shooting into an ABC studio, and now they're bringing him back on. What are your thoughts on that, Brad? Because it just seems quite convenient that we hear this story and several hours later, oh, he's back on the air. Do you think they just gave in to pressure? And I'm not talking about corporate or legal pressure. I mean, threats of violent pressure.
It could very well be, Chris, because our culture has taught us one thing. You know, we've got this younger generation of people, this generation that we've raised up, not necessarily younger than us, but now the culture is that if you don't like something and words are violence and you need to take it into your own hands to defeat the fascists, you do it. And it does become an intimidation thing. That's certainly why Charlie Kirk was shot, trying to intimidate people into silence. It's why people did cancel culture. It's why people dox people, trying to intimidate people into silence. And sometimes it works. There very well could be a connection with ABC and Disney trying to quell any more violent eruptions to say, hey, we'll just do this so we don't have any more of that. And that is the wrong response.
Yeah, if you're going to get more of it if you give in to violence. I mean, I think that's one of the issues, and we won't get into it, but like, I really think Israel, I wish they would have been a little more aggressive when they were going after Hamas at the beginning, because I think sometimes if you're like negotiating, you don't negotiate. Like, I know you want your hostages out, but if you negotiate, you're going to delay, you're going to make things worse. Like, America doesn't negotiate with terrorists. ABC, Disney shouldn't negotiate because they're afraid of, people getting harmed. It seems, again, the people that are radical, even if you caved into their demands, I don't see that it's going to necessarily make it better. If anything, if you cave to the demands of a madman or somebody that's threatening violence, they've just told the entire nation that you can use violence as a means to gain whatever it is that you want. And that's kind of what we saw with BLM for the summer of 2020. We saw people using violence as a means to get all kinds of concessions, like defund the police and, hundreds of millions to the BLM movement, which didn't help anyone. And to me, it's almost like, isn't there a biblical principle here that if you subsidize evil, you're just basically going to get more evil? It seems like that's maybe what ABC is doing. Again, I'm speculating, but it does seem like these things may be connected.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, Chris, at the very least, it's you reap what you sow. And if you're going to continue to sow in discord and continue to sow in weakness and continue to sow in giving in, you're going to reap that. I mean, things will not stop until people garner enough courage and boldness to make a stand for what's right. And no one says that's easy. No one says that's even palatable, but it's right. And we have to get to that place where we decide to do what's right or to do what's easy.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Pastor Brad Williams. We're going to have Yaffe up in just a second.
Whether it was their belief system in a God, whether it was their family, whether it was from whatever it is as a mantra. And I'm some dumb redneck kid from Alabama, 19 years old. I didn't know what a mantra was. And he said, what's that one thing that you can hold to that will help you make it through this process? Because if you can hold to something else besides the pain that you're going through, the distress of, hypothermia, cold water, getting beat and buzzed, all that stuff. If you can hold to something else, you can make it through. But if you concentrate on what you're going through, you'll never make it. Right? That was kind of his, and I'm not saying I necessarily agree with all that, but that's what he was putting out. And so I prayed to God. I mean, I knew the one thing I held to was God as a Christian. Grew up as a Christian, right? Got saved when I was 6 years old. Asked Jesus into my heart. Like, God, what could my mantra be? I think it has to be in you. I'm here for my family, for me. I want to do this, but it's in you. What is it? It was 2 Corinthians 12:9, I believe, is the verse that says, is when Paul was asking God, he's saying, hey, take away these thorns in my flesh, right? Whatever the issue was. Some theologians say, believe it was a sight. Some people believe it was other things. But he said, take away these thorns in my flesh. He asked 3 times, and God 3 times said no. And then God says to Paul, he says, my strength, this is 2 Corinthians 12:9, my strength is sufficient for you. Or my grace is sufficient for you. My strength is made perfect in your weakness. And I thought, that's it. And so that is a scripture that the Lord gave me in that time that I really I never I'm sure I'd read it before, but I was a young kid. It's not like it was just brought up to my mind. I remember specifically reading that as I'm praying, reading that in a Bible, in my study Bible, and being in 2 Corinthians, and that scripture stuck out at me. And so that's what all right, God, your grace is sufficient for me. Your strength will be made perfect in my weakness. And that's in that book. Buds wasn't that hard as far as a physical standard. Like you could pass, I could probably even now at 40 years old pass most of the standards. I can still do the O course. I could probably do first and maybe second phase 4-mile time run times. I could probably still do the swim. It's not actually that hard. It's the continuation of it through injury, through constant work that makes it so hard. They make you bad at things that you are often good at. That's why so many athletes struggle with it. So anyway, that's probably the best example I can give of a scripture that
that's
I
a good
held
one.
to.
And I had when I was my first tour downrange when I was mobbing out of Bragg, we had some SEER instructors that spent time with us, and I'll never forget. And I've actually talked about this before. I don't even remember what all they told me. I don't remember how to do my search and rescue dot, but I probably could now. But the reality is, one thing that stuck out with me was he said at one point he like to stopped in the middle of it, like it was an unplanned moment, and he goes, "Hey, let me just say, if you don't already have something bigger than yourself that you believe in, you better get it right now before you go downrange, because if they ever take you, you better have something to hang on to that's more than you."
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And for me that was my faith.
Yeah.
And for me that was mine in downrange was Psalm 91, the soldier psalm they call it.
That was my wife's on my first deployment.
And my wife's the one who gave it to me.
Okay.
I don't think I even knew Psalm 91 until she gave it to me.
No, I didn't. My wife can quote it word for word still.
Absolutely.
We were married. How old was she? I think I was 21. I might have been 22, and she was 19 when we got married. And we got married, and 2 months later, I rolled to Afghanistan, and it was a great deployment. Man, it was the Wild West. We're killing everybody we came in contact with. Those bad guys. It was what you trained for. It's what you desired. It's what you were going to do. It was great. Now hindsight being 2020, it's like, should we have even really been there? Now knowing what we've done, or at least seeing how they pulled out of Afghanistan. And but at the time, man, it's what you wanted to do as a young SEAL. And my wife, though, she knew that. She knew that what we were going into, what we were doing, and she prayed Psalm 91 every day. That was her verse.
Charlene did the same. My wife did the exact same thing. You look at my notes. That's a perfect segue. Let me do this.
No, I can't even read your notes.
Tell me. I can read I'm the only one who can read my notes.
That's important. That's the only thing that matters.
So tell me about your wife. So y'all met, and she's a team wife, obviously.
Yeah, she is.
Which is not easy.
No. Yeah, she. We met. We were just talking about this the other day. I think she's 3.5 years younger than I am. I'm 39 right now, and she's about to turn 36. So we met. She was 18, and I was whatever that would have been, 21 into 22. I had just I'd been a SEAL for like 6 months, maybe 8 months, right? I did my first.
So you were still a SEAL pup.
I was a SEAL pup, man. I was a new guy. I did my first, deployment, or what they would count as a deployment. I checked in at the end of an Iraq deployment, stayed in Germany doing working with the Group 1 leadership as they're doing a pass-through. Decompression stop is what they called it for the whole team. So I stayed there as the whole team rotated through from Iraq. And I can't remember where we went into in Iraq, but I went with a master chief. Me and just a master chief went into Iraq. We had to check in and do something, and I can't remember what we did, and then we flew over to Germany. It was only there for a week. And that's one point I like to make in these podcasts. Guys or anytime I talk, guys will be like, oh, yeah, Iraq, Afghanistan, or whatever we are. Just because I've got an Iraqi ribbon, Operation Iraqi Freedom, or whatever. You got guys that have that stuff all the time. They got their combat action badge or their combat action ribbon or whatever. Just because you were in a country where combat was happening doesn't mean that you were in combat, right? And so there is a lot of that goes on. Just because I was in Iraq doesn't mean that I was doing what the boys were doing in Salter City, that deployment. I checked in at the tail end of that, and then I went to Germany. So just because you're a part of it doesn't mean you were doing it. And there is a misconception with that a lot of times. One, with how people receive it, but also two, with maybe even how guys present it sometimes. So there's probably I don't know. I like to make sure that that's understood. Went to Germany, went through, get back from that, and was selected to go to sniper school as a new guy, which is very rare. And so I went to sniper school, and that was when I met my wife. And
You met her at sniper school?
yeah, so before I went to sniper school, I had to bring all the weapons that we were bringing back from. They landed at one of the. It might have been Fort Bragg, but they landed at one of the Army bases. I think it was Fort Bragg. They landed there. Me and another guy, a buddy of mine, I won't say his name. He's at Red Squadron still, or he was at Red Squadron. He might be. He was an instructor at Green Team not too long ago, so he might still be over there. But me and him flew out to pick up those weapons from
9 to 11 Central Time, Huntsville, from 1 to 3 Eastern Time, Chattanooga. That's I'm sure you have to do the math every day. But I wanted to talk to you, Yaffe, about the disappointing news that they're going to bring back Jimmy Kimmel. Now, look, I understand nobody watches the show. We don't watch the show. Greg Gutfeld gets 3 times the audience he does
on cable,
which means he has a sixth of the people that have access. So, I mean, I guess it's not that big a deal in the true sense of I mean, it's not really going to affect much, but it's almost like we finally have pushed back on the left, saying you're not going to celebrate the death of an innocent man in front of his wife and kids. You're not going to also, a lot of people on the left made threats against Erica Kirk. I mean, she had to get a restraining order. She has to have extreme security because they're making threats on her. So honestly, I thought the firing of Kimmel sent a message that was a good message that, hey, if you blatantly lie or you're willing to basically incite violence against half the country, because I felt like that's what he was attempting to do when he said MAGA did this, you might lose your job. And I'm fine with that. But what are your thoughts? Because this seems like a very big turnaround, because there were several articles from people that work on the show that said, yeah, there's pretty much zero chance that Disney's changed his mind. And that article came out like 4 hours ago. So what happened and what are your thoughts, Yaffe?
Well, unfortunately, a couple of different things happened. One, I guess Jimmy Kimmel is going to apologize in some way. We'll have to see what that is, but I know that was one of the requirements here. But we have to remember a lot of the people in charge of ABC, in charge of Jimmy Kimmel, all that stuff, they're a part of that left-wing bubble. And the left-wingers went nuts over this. And we're putting a lot of pressure on Disney, calling this an attack on free speech. And there's a possibility that played a role. Now, what would be interesting, though, is to see what some of this, because a lot of this started because of the affiliates were the ones that came out against it. So now that this has happened, we'll see if the apology is good enough where the affiliates will be on board. Because ABC can make the decision to keep the show, and then the affiliates can still say, no, we're not carrying this. And that would change things. But I don't know. First, I want to hear exactly what the apology would be before I can make a full judgment. But I tend to agree with you. This could have been an example of consequence culture. And I don't know. Let's see what happens.
Yeah, I know it's not legal, but I really wanted him deported to Somalia. I mean, I know, I guess technically we can't do that, but I was just kind of hoping.
Well, how about we let him do the show from there?
Yeah.
He can continue doing the show just from Somalia. You have to live there.
Yeah. I mean, that would be a more exciting show because you got to run from a bunch of gangs. And also there's pirates there. 15% of Somalia's economy was piracy for a long period of time. Now it's not quite so bad. So they're really picking things up there, of course, with the people they're sending over here with certain congresswomen. Yeah, we will. I don't know how much it's improved. But yeah, I mean, honestly, this guy, the sad thing is he used to be funny. That was he did the Man Show, which when I was I guess it was funny because I was in high school when that was out and it seemed funny.
Yeah,
so again, that was probably funny because we were 16 and 17 and 18 years old. I mean, stupid stuff is funny when you're a teenage boy. Okay.
Right.
But he was somewhat funny. It's almost like Colbert when he did the Colbert Report, which is kind of making fun of Bill O'Reilly. It was funny because he would actually kind of he would make fun of the right, but he'd also make fun of the left. He would he would actually go after people from the right, and it was kind of in a mocking way. But the Colbert Report really kind of gave you a little bit of both sides, and it was, again, I thought it was well done. And now his show is nothing but a snooze fest. And that's another thing with Kimmel. It's not that he's a jerk and that he's I feel like he's a degenerate person. It's that I feel like Disney's losing $30 to $60 million a year on this guy, and bringing him back's only going to embolden them. So is Disney just not in the business of making money anymore? I mean, what's going on here?
That is a great question. There are so many things that Disney has done recently that I'm just like, I don't understand. Now, they did just release the movie trailer for Mandalorian and Grogu. So maybe that saves them in terms of movies. I don't know. Maybe that's a change, but it, it's hard to tell because this is breaking. So I have a feeling we're going to get more reports out on some of the behind the scenes on how they got Kimmel back. But I think a lot of this is social pressure. We forget that the left was very good at cancel culture, very good at the social pressure, and it probably played a role here, as unfortunate as that is.
Yeah, I mean, what bothers me though is, and I mentioned this to my last guest, there was a attack on an ABC affiliate, and it was a left wing guy because 99% of political violence is from the left, and you guys can check.
Oh, don't say that. The
Yeah.
texters are going to go crazy.
You
I've
text
had
me on-
people tell me that it's different. It's like, but all the evidence suggests that that's true.
Well, those people are idiots, and I don't care what they have to say. Those people need to look at all the riots from this 73 to now, and riots where someone was injured or killed, and I guarantee about 10,000 of them were left. About 2 or 3 of them are right. So you can point to one that was slightly on the right. Everybody could do that, but we're talking about 99%. Yeah. And honestly, it's more than that. I'm just being generous by saying that. And if people have a different opinion, I totally respect their ability to be wrong. That's totally fine. A lot of people are wrong, but definitely those people that argue with me on
Part
that.
of free speech is your right to be wrong.
Yeah, it's your
we
right to
appreciate
be
that.
wrong. Yeah, absolutely. I wish it wasn't, but apparently Kimmel's taking great advantage of his right to be wrong. And you're right. I love what you said. Disney, I don't understand that. Disney went 40 years with one flop, and it was a flop. I think it was 1984. They had one bad flop, and the movie wasn't even that bad. They've had 5 major flops in the last 4 years. Their stock price is below what it was 5 years ago, and that is unheard of with Disney, which is one of the best stocks in American history up until they went woke. They destroyed the Marvel brand, which is that was inconceivable. They had destroyed Marvel. They destroyed Star Wars. I mean, they've destroyed everything that was the unbelievable IP. You don't even have to make great movies. You can just make crap movies. Just don't destroy the IP where you're turning Luke Skywalker into a trans guy or something like that. But yeah, I mean, this is the thing. Disney has to give an account to its stockholders. It's publicly traded, right? I mean, I'm a retired attorney. I know this. And if they continue to put people like Kimmel on and push a woke left agenda, their stock prices are going to continue to go down, and they're going to get sued. And the problem is they're going to, I'm not saying for sure, I think the chances that they lose are very, very high, in which case then they're going to be forced to change anyway. So are these leftist corporations, did they not care about their duty to their shareholders anymore?
It makes you wonder if maybe the show was making money in another way that we're not realizing. Did the guests pay to come on or so? I'm really curious about that, because I was shocked, I have to say, when they were talking about how much production costs for Colbert, when the whole thing about him firing came out, and they're like, oh, it cost $100 million to do that show. And I'm like, where does all that money go? And there is no way in today's media environment that they can make that back. So what is the benefit of having that show? So it makes sense for Colbert. It's similar for Kimmel. I don't know what that show brings to ABC that they are so insistent on keeping it around. It really baffles me that somebody who has the numbers and the books on the inside of Disney, please explain that to me, because I really don't understand it, other than it being that it's part of Hollywood, and Hollywood is controlled by the woke left. And when you know anything about the woke left, the agenda is sometimes more important than the bottom line, I guess.
Oh, yeah. I mean, but again, they're going to get sued. They're going to lose. But you're right. That doesn't make sense to us. I was looking at their guests too. If you look at the old days, even before Trump, when these people had guests, it was people like Tom Cruise or Tom Hanks or something like Scarlett Johansson, actual actors and actresses that had interesting movies or maybe a book, and they'd tell a funny story, and then they have a monologue where they tell jokes. I mean, they might have a political one here or there, mostly not political jokes, right? Mostly culture stuff. And over the last couple of years, if you look at the guests, the Colbert and Kimmel, it's 99% of them are left. I think maybe like you could maybe count Arnold Schwarzenegger maybe as one that's like middle, but he's, he didn't vote for Trump either. But that's the thing. If you look at like Colbert and Kimmel, you see people that are frequent guests. Elizabeth Warren, she has the personality of, I don't know, a clamshell. She's just like the most least interesting person. AOC maybe is maybe more entertaining, but not compared to like a Hollywood celebrity. I mean, and Bernie Sanders, I mean, he's 1,000 years old. He's like a dinosaur. So like, why are you bringing on Bernie Sanders 4 or 5 times? Bring on some actors and actresses. It doesn't make sense.
You should really get JP. I bet he could find this. There's a clip that was going viral from, I don't know, 40 years ago when Johnny Carson was doing an interview. And he talked about why he didn't really get into politics. And he said, he's like, I don't see that as my job as an entertainer. Like, I could theoretically get on a soapbox, but he's like, I'm an entertainer. I'm not a political activist. It's really telling the difference between that and now.
Yeah, he actually took his job seriously, and he thought his job was to entertain because he saw that as his role, and he thought it was a sacred thing. I mean, because it's good. People work hard; they have hard lives. It's nice to make them laugh before they go to bed, and that's an important thing. And if they want to watch politics, they can turn on the news, which comes on literally before Carson. So they got politics right before him anyway. They didn't need another dose of it. So hopefully things change. But let's take a quick break. We're gonna have more with Yaffe on this abysmal decision by Disney. Back in a second.
Team 3 and escort them back to the West Coast because they landed in at the East Coast at one of the Army bases. And when we flew out to pick those up, they let him fly back with them by themselves because I didn't go on leave when I graduated SQT. I checked in pretty much immediately I was at the team for like a week, painting bathrooms and doing stupid stuff, with a couple of guys. And then we went to the tail end of the Iraq deployment into that Germany thing. So they said, hey, since you didn't get to go on leave, fly over here with Chris and y'all pick up those weapons, account for them. I helped him inventory them. He can fly back with them by himself because we're going to have somebody meet him in San Diego, and you can drive home. My mom and dad came and picked me up in North Carolina. They drove to North Carolina, picked me up, and drove me home, and I stayed at home for 7 days. They didn't even charge me any leave for it. They just let me go.
So she was back here. She's an Alabama girl?
She's an Alabama girl.
Okay.
And I met her during that time. My brother and his girlfriend at the time, now wife, somehow connected us, and her family went to my dad's church where he pastored at. We met up, went on one date, and then we just started talking, and somehow the Lord made it happen. 6 or 7 months later, I graduate sniper school, have a big family shoot, and we had been dating. I'd already gotten a ring. I called her. Her dad came up with my dad and brothers because they let him shoot all the sniper guns. They do like a family day. None of the girls came up. It was just my dad, my brothers, and Lauren's dad. And we're fishing in my buddy's pond up there that I'm still friends with, Troy Dehart. And I said, hey, man, to Greg, my father-in-law, I said, hey, man, I'm going to ask Lauren to marry me if it's okay with you. And he's like, oh, man, you better ask her. Just went back to fishing. That was it. So that's that was.
He was in his happy place. Why bother him with that?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And then about 8 months later, we got married before
awesome.
I deployed to Afghanistan. So, yeah, she was with me from the start, really, of my SEAL career, almost the start.
Team wife's not easy. I said that a minute ago. My wife, I've said that she's a rock. I mean, I've got multiple deployments, and she held down the fort. And at the same time, I never came home not knowing who my kids' teachers were, what their grades were, what the latest ins and outs of life were, because she made everything just seem so relevant and updated me constantly.
Man. Yeah, dude,
but she also kept all the bills paid and the yard mowed and the whole thing, man. I mean, but at the same time, you were active duty in the teams. That's a high up tempo life. How was it for her and for the marriage?
I mean, it was good. I mean, she misses the teams a lot of times. She liked because her parents were divorced, and so she bounced around between her grandparents, her mom, her dad, and she's got a good family and had a good life. Close with her brother. Her brother's a good dude. Works for Alabama Power, pretty high up in Alabama Power. But Trent's a good guy, and we have a close relationship with him. There's never like bad relationship with anybody in the family, or at least on her side. She just wasn't settled. So team guy life for her and team wife life was actually pretty good because she was used to that. Going to be at mom's, going to be at dad's, going with my grandparents. She was used to kind of that bouncing around, and so she would do that, and
God built her for it.
Kind of. It's almost like he kind of knew what she was going to go into, and she would have never thought she'd be that. Now she hates it when I deploy, hates it when I go somewhere. She pitches a fit if I ever say I'm going overseas to do anything. Right? She doesn't, but she was actually pretty good at it. She misses the community team guy life. She does miss that. She even talks about it now. We didn't have kids while I was in the teams. That was one thing. She did not want to have kids in the teams because she got to know so many women. We lost dudes all the time, So I say all the time. We lost dudes regularly, and she went to those funerals with me. We went to funerals and put your trident in a coffin, and she knew their wives. And some of these guys had kids, and now daddy's gone from her, and she just didn't. For her, of course, we were married. She was 19 at the time. I think I was 22 into 23, around that age range, and we didn't. She just did not want to have kids in that life with me deploying. That was probably the biggest thing, is it being hard to start a family.
Did you have connectivity? I mean, it's crazy, modern deployments. My granddad went to World War II. He was a glider rider.
Talk to anybody.
And he was gone for 3 years.
Yeah.
And I came home when it was done. But did you have connectivity? Could you call home, email, that kind of thing?
We did, whenever somebody would die in country, that, which happened pretty regularly, you go River City, and not be able to talk for a week or 3 days until the next of kin was notified.
Right.
I mean, we would still talk some, you call out on sat phone, different things, but generally speaking, it was hit or miss, but we did have connectivity. We were on a fob one day, and I was talking to her on the phone on a green line, and, a little bit of a delay. We're just talking, and all of a sudden here,
You're listening to Rightside Radio. We've got Yaffe on the line. This is Chris Reed from the Daily Controversy, filling in for Phil. He's going to be on CNN tonight with Abby Phillips. You guys definitely check that out. We just got news that Jimmy Kimmel is going to be back tomorrow. I know our listeners probably don't watch that show, but one of the things that was interesting, Yaffe, is that ABC 10 out of Sacramento was shot by a crazy person. Well, I'll say crazy person. We'll just say a left-wing person because I don't need to repeat. So it was a left-wing person shot a bunch of times. Thankfully, I don't think anybody was injured. And the person was able to get out on $200,000 bail. Now, as soon as they got out on bail, which they shouldn't have gotten out at all, I should have no-bailed somebody like that. It was basically attempted murder. They got rearrested by the feds. So, Yaffe, here's my question. It really seems like the time between the violent terrorist act against ABC 10 in Sacramento by a leftist and the time ABC put Jimmy Kimmel back on air was limited. And consider that there was an article saying there was almost zero chance Disney would ever put Kimmel back, according to an insider on the Kimmel Show. Is this Disney giving in to terrorist violence? Because it's certainly like I don't know that for sure. Maybe they had the deal worked out before this. Who knows? But it does seem like the minds got changed in a fairly close time frame after this violent person shot up an ABC 10 studio in Sacramento.
I hope not. I mean, in a way, I seriously doubt that had something to do with it, but it's always going to kind of look like that, right? You know what I mean? I mean, the timing is just
Bad.
It's just not good. But I really am looking forward to the reporting on the behind the scenes because I don't really know. It really did seem like, I mean, I saw several reports for the past few days that yes, they were trying to get Jimmy Kimmel to at least come on and apologize, and he was refusing to do so. So I think my guess is they got Jimmy Kimmel to say something. Like he is going to say something on the show that's an apology. And that's going to placate people enough, depending on what he says, which I don't know what that would be. I just can't imagine him giving a sincere apology for his comments. And I do want to say real quick, a lot of people are focusing on the misstatements about trying to portray the shooter as MAGA. But I thought the second part was bad too. I mean, to immediately start trying to use this to make fun of Trump and, oh, Trump isn't grieving his friend. I just thought that was in poor taste too. It's like, what are you doing? They haven't even buried him yet. And this is your response? There's just something sick about that.
Yeah, I hated that too because he knew they were tight, and you're like, there's just some things you don't do. Like normally in a civil society, you try not to speak ill of the dead. Like even if you're going to say something like, "Hey, may have disagreed," but like you don't do what you've seen go on. I think Jimmy Kimmel's just like a lot of people on the left. They don't have friends on the other side. They don't listen to anybody. They're very angry and bitter. And the thing they don't understand though too is like the sad part is it ruins people of humor. Like if you can't understand who you're making fun of and maybe even like them a little bit, you're not going to be funny. And I was just looking for like the last time I saw like a really good Kimmel joke, and I was like, man, this is probably 2014. Like like it's been a long time. So I don't know what he's going to say. He didn't write it, even if he did say it. Like, what is it going to matter? And doesn't that bring us back to the fact that this is still a $30 to $60 million losing enterprise? Do they think that now that they took him off and they brought him back on, it's going to increase ratings? It'll definitely increase ratings tonight because people want to go watch what he's going to say. But it's not going to necessarily bring you any new, like, long-term viewers. The average listener or the average audience member of Kimmel is what, like 68 or something like that. So I don't understand the move. Hopefully he'll say something. Do you think they're going to actually make him say something of substance, or is it going to be like a vague, wiggly like thing that you say to try to get out of something stupid, but you really don't apologize, but you do enough so the PR people can say that you did?
Well, I'm always going to question his motives and
oh yeah, no doubt.
Whether he really means it. I do think ABC, it's probably going to be more substantial of an apology than a usual apology. That being said, it's interesting. You had asked, did this have something to do with basically the terrorists shooting up the ABC station? Is that part of why they did it? And I'm not sure that is why, but I do think part of this is placating to the lefties in their base, because outside of that, like I said, there were a lot of people on the left, a lot of people in Hollywood who were demanding ABC do this, and frankly, a lot of Democrat politicians were doing the same thing.
Yeah. It's like they don't watch the show either. I mean, nobody does according to ratings. So it's like, oh, we really want this guy back on the air so we can ignore him. They're like, all right, like I guess we could you could literally put anyone there. You can just put like Elizabeth Warren or Bernie or AOC or one of them, and they'll probably get you as much, if not more. So that's the thing that I'll never get. I'll never understand why they decided to do it that way. I do want them. I will be interested to see what he says tonight. I'll probably I'm not going to stay up and watch that, but I do hope I
think it's tomorrow, right?
Oh, sorry, tomorrow.
Yeah.
And hopefully it is something that at least like sounds sincere. But yeah, I mean, he already was given the chance to apologize and keep his job, and he told his boss to pound sand. And so, and at that point, it's like, okay, if you're gonna say it now, he looks like he doesn't have, like, he had no character by saying it in the first place because what he said was evil and false. But on the other hand, the fact that if he's willing to back down and say whatever it takes to keep his job, he's also a coward. So Kimmel's a coward either way. But at least if he apologizes, he'll be in the right because what he said was evil and wrong and ridiculous. So I hope he does. I just, like you said, I don't believe it. None of us do. But thank you so much, Yappy. It was so good to have you on. We got more coming up on Rightside Radio.
Order came in, or a recoilless rifle rocket came in and hit, and was like, hey, I got to go. We got to get to our fight positions. And she's like, what was that? And he just hung up the phone and bounced. So she did deal with stuff like that she talks about now that she didn't like at the time.
My wife tells the exact same story. I'm sitting on the roof of our safe house in Afghanistan where my team was located on a sat phone talking to her, and all of a sudden something went cha-choom.
Yeah.
And she goes, what was that? I said, nothing, baby. And I'm looking at one of my guys going, what was that?
Yeah, got to go.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. We did have we had the same connectivity, and we had the same comms blackouts if we lost somebody. And I'll never forget, I had a special phone because I did a lot of interconnectivity on my second tour in Baghdad, and we had Sadr City and parts of Rasafa district. And
when were you in Sadr City?
04.
Okay, all right, yes.
But and it was a mess.
Oh,
and we
yeah,
lost some
man.
good guys, but we had one particular day where it was a coordinated ambush. We had IED strikes followed by small arms and RPGs that took out 3 of our guys, and so the comms blackout went in. Well, my wife, the phone that I carried had the ability to call in, and I told her, I said, "Don't ever call in, hon, unless it's an emergency. If I call you, we'll talk, but don't call me. But if it's an emergency, just know you can." Well, she called that night because she's literally watching the news, looking at patches on the shoulder, and realizing, oh my gosh, I think I know where that is. And I think that's Phil's unit. And she called me that night. Oh, it was a rough one.
Yeah.
But it's hard for the wife sometimes being back
Oh yeah.
home.
Well, I mean, you got to think you're the one. You're not in the know. You're not in the know. But yeah, you're together. It says that's why Scripture tells us that the man leaves his parents so the two can become one flesh. I mean, so you join and you become one flesh, and we're a family. We are, I still have my mom and dad, still respect my mom and dad, but now I am the headship of this, and she is part of that, and we're one flesh. And when you go on these deployments, these wartime deployments, you're pulled apart, and she's living in the unknown all the time. Now, you know what's going on, right? And you're doing it. So that takes a strong person, not just a strong woman, just a strong person in general. When I say person, because you got kids that deal with the same thing too. They're part of that unit, that family unit. I don't say team for family. My wife likes saying team, and I'm like, no, family's not a team. A family's a family, which in my opinion is different than a team. I was a team guy for my entire career. That's what they call us. That's our nicknames, team guys. I know what a team is like. A family's not like a team. It's even deeper. It's more. It's a deeper rooted thing than a team. And a team is pretty deep. We can agree on that. Your family is one level deeper, and that's why we're born into the family of Christ. We're part of God's family in the person of Jesus Christ. It's more than a team. We're not teamed up with Christ. We're in His family. And so I don't know if that makes sense.
No, it makes perfect sense. Let me ask you, let me segue off that, though. I'm going to chase a rabbit again. So you're a team guy.
Yeah.
And now you got a family, and God saw fit to make sure you had all girls.
Oh, yeah.
So you come from team guy, law enforcement, doing all the alpha male stuff, and yet you go home and you are so outnumbered right now.
Yeah, man. Well, I got a buddy he's got daughters too. He said it just means I was man enough to blow the balls off of them. That's what he always says. So, sorry for the ladies that listen to this, but I always think it's funny. No, man, I wouldn't trade those girls for anything. I mean, it is different. Love my wife, have my wife, but those girls,
How old are they roughly?
9, 6, and 3.
Awesome.
So yeah, we got 9, 6, and 3, and
girls are hard too.
They're hard.
You wait, man, they're gonna be teenagers.
What I've learned, I think, in my brothers, my brothers have sons, and they also have daughters. So I got nieces and nephews. We have more girls than boys in our family, the grandkids side. So all the cousins, we all get together. It's all girls, and just 4 boys now but there's a baby. He's Bennett is a little over a year. I think he's 18 months.
Hey, all you Rightside ruffians out there, you are listening to Rightside Radio, solid conservative, just plain right.
You're listening to Rightside Radio. This is Chris Reed from the Daily Controversy. You can find me anywhere you get your podcast. Just type in the Daily Controversy with Christopher Reed. We've got Wolverine Dan on the line. I have here in my notes that you want to talk about Kimmel. I'm guessing you're not a fan of Jimmy Kimmel since you're listening to this show.
Well, let me put it to you this way. First off, what I'm amazed with is that Disney, ABC, is so filthy rich that, I mean, you or I or normal people would go freaking out if I lost $50 million. That's the first thing that drives me nuts. The second thing is he is not funny, okay? And he's probably going to be a smart butt. I won't say the nasty word, but he's going to be a smart butt tonight and, thinks he got away with something, okay, which he really didn't. But see, Disney and the people that run it in the left hate people that are God-fearing, common folk, quote-unquote, I guess, Trump people, so bad, they're willing to throw away $50 million like it's nothing. That's what blows me away with all this. What do you think?
I mean, you make a good point. I mean, look what Disney did. They also put a show on called The Acolyte, which was like a Star Wars show where they lost 200 plus million, and and like the main characters were like, I guess, lesbian cis who somehow had a baby even though they were both lesbians. Nobody watched it past the third episode because it creeped people out so much. And Disney, like the only part of revenue they're making is their parks, but their parks are increasing revenue at a much, much slower rate than they used to. And it's like I was saying earlier, like I'm a retired attorney. I know this. I think the state of Florida is suing Disney at least because they've invested in them. The fact is, they're losing 50 million here. They've lost over $1 billion the last 4 years on flops because they promoted trans ideology, LGBTQ stuff, ridiculous left-wing garbage in like their children's movies. And like if you're Disney, you've got the best IP in the world. You can make a movie about anything. Just put some funny jokes in there. And like it's not like you have to have the greatest script writers, you know. So they're, to me, it's almost like they want to lose money. And maybe and here's what I think, and I've a lot of people have said this. The people at Disney, the corporate executives, would rather be accepted at like left-wing cocktail parties than be a big deal on Wall Street, because for 5 years they've been taking losses. This is the only 5 years where their stocks were not generally trending in the right direction. And Kimmel, again, even if they take him back, it's still going to cost them $30 to $60 million. They haven't released the exact numbers. It could be worse because his ratings are actually way worse than Colbert, and Colbert got fired. So do you just think this is a situation where they just don't simply care? And this is basically true for woke corporations like Disney and a lot of other corporations.
The way I see it, I don't know, in my closing, I'll get off the radio. My idea is this. I think they're so filthy rich, a lot of the left, and there's a lot on the right that are rich, which is nothing wrong with that. But they're so rich on the left, some of these people, they just want to be seen that they can contribute to LGBTQ or something. They want to be in the limelight showing that, we are part of it. But the majority of their investments probably might be in conservative companies. You understand what I'm saying? So they're making money off the conservative way, probably. And they're just, it's all being, your FaceTime is what it is. It's FaceTime. It's exactly what it is. Because it doesn't matter to them the money, because they got more money than they can spend. That's just that's how it plays out. That's the way I see it. Now I'm going to hang up. Let answer that. I'll see you.
All right, thank you, Wolverine Dan. Appreciate that. I couldn't agree more. I mean, there's no money in woke ideology. You don't make money this way. Like, look at the companies that have gone woke. Cracker Barrel, they lost hundreds of millions of dollars, maybe slightly less because they've now like gone the other way. Maybe they were able to, maybe it's not so bad now. But if you look at places like American Eagle, you know what they did that was so amazing and non-woke? They used a pretty blonde girl to sell jeans. And this was like creative and amazing. I'm like, people have been using pretty girls to sell ads since, I don't know, thousands of years, like companies have. But they're doing great. Their stock went up, $200 million. Other companies are hiring Sydney. It's not like you have to go right wing. I don't remember a Sydney Sweeney in the American Eagle ads, like, with a Trump hat on saying "Go MAGA." Like that wasn't even the point. The point was that we're going to just we're going to try to return to things that are good, true, and beautiful. And for advertisers, they usually use beautiful women to sell products. Now, sometimes they go too far. Sometimes it'd be immodest. That's a whole other discussion. But you have to remember that places like Calvin Klein were using 250-pound trans-identified ladies or men or whatever they were. And the most aesthetically ugly ads I've ever seen in my entire life. I mean, Calvin Klein as well. I think they had an ad with a 300-pound woman, which again, you're trying to sell underwear, not something that something that you'd want people to see as an ideal. And when you're doing that, it doesn't work. And this is the same thing with Jimmy Kimmel. Like it's not like there's not funny comedians, right? There are plenty of great comedians out there. Like you could give a lot. Dave Chappelle, like he's certainly not a right-wing guy. I mean, I think he voted for Democrats the last couple of elections, but he is funny. Like, he actually was willing to tell jokes that will offend people on the left. They tried to cancel him on Netflix. It didn't work because, again, he's funny. You can South Park. South Park, those guys are libertarians, but they'll make fun of whoever you want to make fun of, whether it's Trump or Democrats or whatever. They're going to make fun of whoever's in power. So they make a lot of money, like hundreds of millions of dollars. It's not like you can't find someone. I mean, that guy who was on SNL recently, star of Tires, they actually kicked him off of SNL because I guess he told jokes that were too, I don't know, extreme for them. Like, he could replace Kimmel, and they would get 3 to 5 million people a night. They would triple their the amount of money they get from sponsors. So what's the idea of these late night shows having to keep these guys on ad infinitum? Like, these people are, no one's better than what the market says. Like, the market says you're garbage. It doesn't mean you're a garbage human being, although I think Jimmy Kimmel is a garbage human being. It does mean that you're not producing revenue and that you're not funny. And fine, if you want to do that on HBO because they have other sources of revenue, they can afford to have some like flops for political shows. I think Real Time does all right, but other than that, the other stuff they have, John Oliver does terrible, my understanding at least. So if you want to go on that or do something on Netflix, whatever, just do it. But these the problem is eventually once you go too low as far as the revenues, the sponsors are going to dump you, even if they like your politics or not. They're going to dump you because they're going to want to put anything on, and if they can play a rerun of a TV show from 5 years ago and it'll get more views, they're going to do that, and that's eventually what's going to happen. So I really don't care what Disney does. It feels like this is just a return of the left wing that likes to whine about everything. And we're basically giving in to the whining. I think that's the worst thing you can give into. It's whining. Same thing with kids. If they whine too much, don't give in to them. They're going to turn out to be horrible people. They're going to turn out to Democrats. That's the worst part. Like, if you give a kid everything they want and they smart mouth you and you never push back, that's going to be the next Democratic president, like every single time. So I don't understand why Disney would find this to be like a smart move. But I haven't really seen ABC Disney make smart movies. It's the same thing with The View. The View's been losing money for a long time. The only thing about The View, and I will agree with some people that my conservative industry, The View is great for us because we use so many clips. Like, it's such a good clip. Like, if you're looking for some really good material on a slow news day, you can look at like The View from yesterday, be like, oh man, this is gold. This is comedy gold. So I honestly don't want them to get canceled because we use so much of their clips, and it's great. But when it comes to these late night shows, one, I think the medium of late night is just not what it is or what it was, say, 10, 20 years ago. So it's just done in that well. Two, none of the people on are funny. The only one that's okay, I guess Jimmy Fallon's okay, is he's not like super left-wing political. He's just, he hasn't really developed as a comedian since he was 25. He still kind of does the same like lame jokes and games and like thinks which is hilarious when he's in his like late teens, early 20s, maybe late 20s. I thought that was really funny, but he's just getting up in his 40s. He's probably 50. And so maybe it's just like, you didn't see Johnny Carson was always funny. Jay Leno was always funny when they were getting older, but they weren't acting like they were 22 years old. Jimmy Kimmel, I don't even know it's that he's acting childish. It's just that he doesn't know how to tell jokes anymore. And again, it's just like one of the worst things that ever happened to the left is they stopped being funny. It used to be that people on the right were considered straight-laced and, people that you don't like, people that were just boring, like the Mitt Romney types. Now people on the right are funny. We've got a big coalition with working class people, blue collar people. We've got a lot of people in our coalition that are hilarious, that have are going to make great contributions to the arts and entertainment. But the left, like, because their worldview is so caustic, it's so negative, it's so bad. They're not telling jokes that we find entertaining. All they do is they make fun of Trump, but like, good, eventually that's going to get old. Like, go make fun of somebody else if you want to, or if you're going to make fun of Trump, do it in a funny way. South Park makes money not because they're right wing. They're certainly not. They make money because they generally tell jokes that people find to be somewhat amusing. Kimmel's not going to change that. He's not been funny for a long time. He's not going to be funny. He's not going to make ABC money. There's no point at all in him continuing to do this. It is ridiculous that they're willing to bring this guy back on, but we've given him enough of our airtime. We got a lot more things to talk about today. We got Magdalene Rose coming up next hour, and we got Phil Williams coming up after that. But we're going to take a quick break. We will be right back.
So I say that to say those boys, I've noticed that they're destructive, but they're actually easier as children, is what we notice. Or I say they're easier as children. They're harder as little children because they're destructive than girls, because girls are not as destructive. But what I've seen now, looking at the teenage side of it, boys just kind of stay the same. You kind of know what you're getting. Yeah, they might be destructive, but boys are just kind of the same all the way through it. Those girls, they shift. There is a shift, and the drama comes in, and I'm already seeing it with a 9-year-old. I can't imagine, the teenage years. I mean, her and my wife fighting over like how our hair is going to be done or clothes. The 3-year-old fighting over shoes. This is what girls do. What I've learned about girls, I actually asked ChatGPT this. I said, why do girls?
You went to the Oracle.
I went to the Oracle, ChatGPT. Why do girls always leave the drawers open? And ChatGPT, is that something in your house?
Yeah.
Dude, I am going to have a panic attack over drawers and cabinets in the house. It's pure laziness, I think, is what it is. A lack of discipline and laziness.
I refuse to affirm or deny anything that you just said.
But it's just like a clutter bomb. I would almost rather stuff just be destroyed. It's just like a clutter bomb of mess, all this little knick-knack crap everywhere, drawers open. That, to me, that's what drives me up a wall, right? And it's not just it's my wife and all of my daughters. So I got
wait until she's 14 and the boy comes around.
Oh yeah, I don't even want. I'm not even thinking about that.
So my daughter, who's grown and married now, my daughter, I'll never forget one of her first boyfriends. So my dad, career Army, highly decorated, 2 tours in Vietnam. My granddad, career general officer when he retired, the whole thing. So the kid comes over to meet the family. Granddad comes in. My dad, who was probably less sensitive than me in many ways and some of this stuff, he's passed away now. Agent Orange finally caught up with him. But Dad walks in, looks at him and goes, "Oh, look, are you the guy?" And we apparently have a father and a grandfather both trained to kill. How do you like that?
Yeah,
that was his introduction to the family.
Yeah.
But well, let me ask you this too. Being a team guy, did you ever have that moment where you came home and you're like in team guy, because you're like living in a locker room for a year on deployment.
Yeah.
I mean, you go over there and it's all rough cut humor and maybe crass talk and things. And then you walk back in the house and it's the wife and 3 little girls.
Yeah.
And do you have to retool yourself?
I won't say you retool yourself. You just flip a switch on or off. I can be more like me in front of my wife, than and that's okay. And she just gets mad at me, she'll get mad at me for saying certain things. But as far as the girls, yeah, no, it's definitely a shift because of their age, right? Yeah. There is an age thing and I get that, but 2, because they are girls, and so it's just a switch you flip on or off. Like one of my, I don't know why, but the little one, I don't know who she heard it from one of her cousins, but she started calling everybody like the word that she used. She calls them a fartism. I don't know what a fartism is, but she heard it from one of her cousins, I think, or maybe her older sister. She calls everybody a fartism. I said, hey, little girls don't use the word fart, and my oldest daughter, she says, I've heard you say it, Daddy. And I say, yeah, I've said it. And I said, but it's different for boys and girls. And my wife said, it's the same for anybody. I said, okay, I'm going to stop you because you're wrong. I said, can a little boy hit any little girl? No. All the girls. And I said, now, what about little girls? Do they hit little boys? You go, yes, we can. Mom was like, no, you don't hit little boys neither. But I said, but you see, we view it as different. Just as society views a little boy hitting a little girl or a man hitting a woman as different, society views what comes out of a young lady's mouth different than what comes out of a young man's mouth. It doesn't mean that it's right or wrong, but it's the reality of what is. And it's a scriptural principle. It says, abstain from the appearance of evil. And for a young woman, abstaining from the appearance of evil, my wife could punch me in the eye and nobody would care. I mean, that's just the bottom line. I'm saying as a law enforcement officer. Because honestly, she might black my eye. A buddy of mine, him and his wife got in a fight, And he came to work. I was actually just training with him the other day. He's going back to the agency to do some stuff, but we're at the in the SEAL teams, and he come to work with a little bit of a black eye and a little cut right here. And we're like, "What happened to you?" He said, "Bro," he said, "me and my wife got in a fight," and he said, "I said something." And he said, "She just punched me in the eye." I just started laughing, and it was funny. Right? We laugh at that. But if he was,
But if he had punched her,
if he had hurt her, he probably would have broke her orbital. I mean, he could have actually. I mean, there's a good chance that if
and you probably would have walked off the team too.
Oh, no, not off the team. He'd been in jail. There'd been a whole process. But what I'm saying is there's a level of difference because he can actually physically hurt her really bad. I don't care who the chick is out there. There are very few chicks. You might have a few that like are fight trained or whatever.
You're listening to Rightside Radio. This is Chris Reed from the Daily Controversy, filling in for Phil Williams. He's going to be on CNN tonight. Just a reminder, you can listen to my show anywhere you get your podcast. Just type in the Daily Controversy with Christopher Reed. Trump is making an announcement on the autism rates. Now, he's already mentioned things he said before. I think this is very interesting. He did mention that the Amish have extremely low or almost zero rates of autism. We're also seeing low rates of autism in the developing world. It really is primarily in developed countries where you're seeing the rise of autism. Now, he also mentioned that places where you don't have like a lot of vaccines and a lot of drugs, you have less. It's interesting because my dad's a physician, and one of the things he says is like, if you take enough drugs, there's going to be side effects. Like if you take, I think it's maybe 4, 5, or 6, like there's 100% chance there's going to be some level of interaction. Now, whether it's a serious one or a minor one, the more drugs you take, the more dangerous it is. Now, Trump's also saying that overuse of Tylenol during pregnancy can lead to an increase in autism. I think they're also going to be looking at, why are we giving the average child 78 jabs of vaccine by the time they're 18, when Europe's like, it's what, 30 to 35? Like, are European kids there? Do they have the plague? Are they walking around and their eyeballs are falling out? It's like a disaster. Like if you listen to the media, you're like, oh my gosh, if we don't give a kid every single vaccine. It's interesting. I was also talking to my dad about like some of these drugs that people were like, oh, we gotta give them this some of these, I don't know if it was MMRI or some of these other ones, but it's like, okay, well, if you give, or for some of these vaccines, you're going to create a massive benefit to 1 out of every 7 million people that you give it to, or maybe 1 out of every 140,000. Okay, but that means that before you get to the one benefit, you're getting a lot of people that have extremely negative side effects. People can die due to certain vaccines. I mean, it's rare, but it can happen. And so what I think RFK is asking is like, okay, is the benefit worth the risk? Because if there's zero benefit, there's not an amount of risk that is acceptable. Because if some of these vaccines we just take because vaccine companies make money, that's idiotic. That's the dumbest thing I ever heard. And we kind of started believing in the magical power of like vaccines because we had some very, like in the 60s and 70s and all these different, like we had a lot of success with some of the older vaccines and they were tested. It looked like there wasn't really that many side effects, and that's not when autism started going up. But once we started giving basically like you have no legal liability if you're a vaccine company, then they started making vaccines like crazy. Okay, so they can do that. They've got to fundamentally change the way we also eat too. Like they need to take out high fructose corn syrup. It's in everything. It's like a cheaper substitute than sugar. Sugar is so much safer for you. It's easy to digest. It's like if they put high fructose corn syrup, it's the same stuff in like Coke and Sprite and all that stuff. It takes like 3 times the effort and energy to burn 1 calorie that has that in it versus say like regular sugar. It's just it's amazingly great as a store of fat, which is not what you want in the second fattest country on earth. So I think whatever JFK and Trump decided to do, I mean, I think some of these, take some of the bad chemicals out of certain vaccines, maybe decrease the amount of vaccines we're giving kids, definitely change the dietary table. So we're not saying that the number one thing you should be eating is, Captain Crunch and a bunch of bread and all this other stuff. that is key. Do I think there's anything that's going to like solve it completely? No, but I do think there's a ton of things we can do. Trump pointed out like you give like newborn infants hepatitis B vaccine, which is a sexually transmitted disease generally. And I guess maybe if you're, your mom, right, has that, and maybe there's a reason to give it to you before you lose some of your immunity as a child. But outside of that, like it's why would you do it? Why do you need to give these powerful vaccines to kids when one, there's very, very little benefit and there's nothing but risk. We saw this with the COVID vaccine because the main risk there was that, you had heart issues, especially with young, healthy men. There were a lot of countries in Europe that they didn't allow men under the age of 30 to get the vaccine because there was really no benefit. There was zero benefit. At least those countries believe there was zero benefit, except in extreme cases. So we've been letting Big Pharma run the show for too long. I'm totally against Big Pharma ads. I mean, I get one reason I'm against them is because I think they're dangerous. Every single civilized country on earth does not allow direct to consumer ads. And you might think that's not a big deal, but it's only us in New Zealand. And the amount of people that have been addicted to drugs, or the amount of drug use among the average American, or the amount of prescription use by the average American, has gone up like 50 to 70% since the advent of direct to consumer ads. And it's not like, and we have better medical technology now than we did 30 years ago when they started. So these are the like things we can do. This is incredibly important that we at least start doing something like this. We can't have a situation where one of every 31 guys has autism. That's unacceptable, especially if there's something we can do to prevent it. But again, the left is going to say, like, they don't want to do anything. They don't try anything because they're in bed with Big Pharma. I mean, Bernie Sanders, who's this left-wing socialist, like took millions of dollars from Big Pharma, and he's going to be an unbiased because he cares about, no, he doesn't. Okay, maybe he does. He just wants to take money. But if you're going to rail against the pharmaceutical companies and corporations and all this kind of stuff, and then they're taking their money, I don't buy it. Like AOC is a communist, and I don't like her. I don't think she takes money from corporations as much. So at least there's some consistency there. Her views are just god awful, but still. So whatever they're trying to do is they're saying basically stop giving people medicine they don't need for things that are no longer risk or that have a benefit 1 out of every 7 million kids, and then you're going to have 100 people that have serious negative reactions to these to get one good reaction. That's insane. That stuff has to stop. What Trump is doing is great. If people disagree, again, I don't care. It's almost like you can forever say that everything we're doing is working at status quo. We have the highest level of chronic disease for any place on earth for children, for adults. And something's got to change. Everything that they're doing now is at least changing things, and I think that's a good thing. All right, we're going to take a break. We're going to have Magdalene Rose on in just a few minutes.
But most chicks hit a dude. Yeah, you might hurt me a little bit, but you need an object to be an equalizer.
Yeah.
Most dudes hit a chick, you're gonna hurt them really bad. So I say all that to say it is different, and it's viewed differently for that reason. We view a guy that hits a girl is extremely bad, and a girl that hits a guy we don't think much of. We don't think much about. You view a guy that has a bad mouth, we might be like, I don't like hanging around that guy because all he does is talk bad all the time. I don't think he's a Christian. But think of the girls that you know that have a filthy mouth. You view them differently. Mm-hmm. And so that's one thing that I try to teach my daughters. That's one thing I learned from the SEAL teams, and trying to flip that switch on and off is there still is a difference. Regardless of how our society wants to blur the lines. There's a difference in how we view it. There's a difference in how people view it. And it's important to understand and uphold that difference.
And stepping back in the house, though, I mean, the decompression piece is good.
Yeah.
That was the place where, like you said, you can be yourself around your wife more than you can anywhere else.
And it's that never was hard for me, though. That was never it was for some guys,
not me
but
either.
Not for
but
me.
it was great. It was wonderful to walk back in and go, ugh.
Oh yeah. That's what it was. It was a relief. I mean, it was almost
Absolutely.
absolutely. Yeah, that's it.
But I do recall one time I'd been back from one of the deployments, not long, and we're late for church. and my daughter, who I think is 10 at the time, is still in the bathroom. And I go up to the door, and she's in the bathroom. And I called her Tootie when she was little. I said, Tootie, pinch it off. We have to go. And my wife leans down the hall and goes, did you just tell your sweet little girl to pinch it off? And I went, I did.
Yeah.
So I had to retool some of to recalibrate some of my lexicon.
What you say, yeah.
Well, let me ask you this. And I'm gonna switch gears here a little bit. Would you? Because I see the things that are in your life. I see the way you talk about your family. I see the way you talk about your faith. Obviously, I can imagine. I mean, my training was a lot different than yours, but I can imagine the dedication and the resilience it took to do the things you did militarily, combat deployments, what you're doing now with your businesses, which I'll get into in a minute. You consider yourself to be a mission-minded person?
Well, I mean, yeah. I mean, obviously, and I think that might just be a thing that men have maybe more so than, let's say, women. Women, and I've learned a lot about women because I have a wife and 3 girls. I'm around them a lot now. So they're very relational. And we have a HR person that works for us. I've known her for a long time at Covenant Rescue Group. She's kind of our office manager in HR. Unbelievably relational. That's why we hired a female for that role. And men are not. And I would say one step further, yeah, I already have that more of mission mindset or complete the job mindset or whatever you want to call it. I would take it one step further with me. I do cherish relationships I have and friendships I have, but at the same time, the mission supersedes the man sort of thing. That's kind of I definitely lean more to that than I do relationally, which is why I think God gave me 3 girls, is He's teaching me how to probably balance the relationship and the mission a little bit better than I have in the past.
All right, so
that's a long-winded answer.
No, it's a good answer. But let me take it a step further. So mission-minded. I mean, like for instance, me, radio, podcasting, practicing law. Those are things that I do, but I feel like I've got a calling that makes those things possible. So in the mission-minded kind of theme of this discussion, how would you take all the things that you do and say, I do them because my calling is?
Well, it's ultimately to present Christ to everybody we come in contact with. That's what I believe. The eternal is far more important than the things that are not eternal. And what is eternal? The only thing that's eternal is who we are in Jesus, right? And so I do believe every aspect of my life, whatever it is, wherever I find myself, I'm going to work as hard as I can so people say, wow, you know what, his actions show something different about him, right? But that's not good enough. I have to let them know what the different thing is, and that is Jesus. That's why I generally share the gospel, anywhere we go. Anybody you ask that's worked with us, I had a guy from a church call and say, hey, so how does CRG share the gospel? We're not a Christian-based nonprofit. We're just a normal 501c3. I just happen to be a Christian who's the CEO of a nonprofit, and we have a bunch of Christians that work for us, and we'll share the gospel. Say, hey, guys, look, we're not a Christian-based nonprofit, but this is what we believe. If you need prayer, if you need anything, we do that with law enforcement agencies. So that is the mission. Here's the importance behind it, and Jesus does this perfectly. I do not. You're asking, I use the mission versus relational, mindset, and this is a good segue into it. Jesus succeeded in fulfilling the mission that relationally a lot of people didn't want him to do. That was to go die on a cross. So he succeeded in fulfilling the mission. Obedience to the Father, obedience to the point of death. Job 13:15, though he slay me, I will trust him. But he did it for the relationship with mankind. It was the perfect mix of the mission and the relationship. And that should be who we are. So the mission is, as a Christian, share Christ with everybody, because that is the only perfect mix of mission-mindedness and relational mindedness, the relationship mindedness. Now, my wife and my girls, unbelievably relationally minded. We'll let the house burn down around us, but if we can go on vacation as a family, then that's what we're going to do. And it's like, well, okay, we can't do that every other week. We're not billionaires that can go and do all this. But let me tell you what, they'll do that. And every one of my buddies say their wives are the same way, right? When can we go do this with the kids? It's just, and the movie that I like to use an example. Have you ever seen Old School? You know the movie Old School?
Oh, yeah.
Well, so Vince Vaughn is in there. He's like, "You sure you want to do this, bro?" They're up on stage to get married. She's like, "Yeah, what are you talking about? Be quiet." And he goes, "No, you sure you want to do this? I mean, look at her. Look at her. There's my wife down there. She's holding the baby. Look, she's just sitting there watching, judging. Look at the baby. Look at the baby." As a unmarried guy, I never got that part. I mean, I always thought it was funny the way Vince Vaughn talks, just watching me, judging me, look at the baby, look at the baby. Now that I'm married, 100% get it, because that's it all the time, and because the family relationship is what they are so in tune with.
Oh, yeah.
So
So we're grandparents now, by the way.
So even more so.
And my wife's grandmom name is Sweetie, which is a perfect fit.
What's your grandpa name?
Cap.
Cap?
I'm Cap.
All right.
Cap
all
and
right.
Sweetie. But Sweetie told me yesterday, if we don't get down to see the grandbaby sometime soon, I'm going to lose my mind.
It's like, hey.
And I want to see them too. But for her, it is way beyond.
To talk about this story from Michael Rees over at Fox. He says UVU professor and former FBI agent warns of new pattern of political violence after Charlie Kirk assassination. It says here a former FBI agent and Utah Valley University professor is warning that a new wave of political violence appears to be increasingly targeting everyday citizens, not just political figures, after Turning Point founder Charlie Kirk was assassinated. The Minneapolis church shooting, the Charlie Kirk shooting, these are different, said Greg Rogers, spent 30 years in the FBI, many of them as a SWAT sniper. These are just citizens that are being murdered for political reasons, which is certainly not unique and brand new, but it's happening much more frequently. He continued, we haven't seen much of that. If you think about political assassinations in the past, even in modern times, you've got John and Bobby Kennedy, you got Ronald Reagan was shot, you got George Wallace when he was governor was shot, you got all these big political national figures, including, I think, Ford, Trump, many others. That seems very different from the normal citizens. But he makes the point that, yeah, it seems like you've got radicalized leftist groups willing to do much more radicalized violence, especially towards Christians. We've seen that with the Minneapolis shooting, the Charlie Kirk shooting, the Covenant school shooting, and those were all people that were trans or had some trans connection. I wanted to get your thoughts on this, Magdalene, because, I mean, the memorial was amazing, and I think that the legacy Charlie leaves is great. But do you think we have a serious chance of having more of these attacks given the state of the American left?
I think we do, and I think one of the reasons for that is that although we have responded in greatness by not rioting, by having memorials, by discussing faith and everything Charlie stood for, there has been no resolution here. I mean, we have the shooter, the alleged shooter, but there isn't actually, I think, for the American people, a plan on how to avoid this and how to de-escalate it. To me, the greatest warrior we have in this fight right now is Brendan Carr at the FCC, because he has a practical ability to stop biased conversations that are unfair in terms of broadcasting rules. So while I think that we are healing, I don't think that we are safe. And someone mentioned on X this morning, I don't remember who it was, that the wave of political assassinations in the 1960s was a wave. It wasn't one of them. And you could say that the first attempt was Trump in Butler, Pennsylvania. And to me, it shows that when you're in a period of time where people are going to violence as a solution, you don't easily exit that. And I don't see us at an exit point for that yet.
You make a great point. It does seem like there's not a clear exit point, or there's not a point to which the left is necessarily going to go off ramp. We saw AOC double down. She's like, I'm sorry he died, but he was a violent, like horrible racist, and he was ignorant and stupid. And I was like, AOC was a bartender from the Bronx, and I've known a lot of smart bartenders, don't get me wrong, but like, she's an idiot. She doesn't know anything about policy. Charlie Kirk could out debate people with PhD. I mean, he literally debated people at Oxford and destroyed them. And he was gracious about it. I'm not saying he destroyed them in the sense he was cruel or mean. He just destroyed them with his grasp of ideas and his intellect. But the left does not believe in the exchange of ideas. They believe in dominance. And it's their attitude that makes people so angry. It's the attitude of, I don't have to debate you because I'm morally superior, when they're infinitely morally inferior. And I hate to say that, but it's true. Like, these are the same people that want to chemically castrate kids and use taxpayer dollars to pay for late-term abortions, and then they're going to lecture us on, you need to be for these trans kids. I'm like, well, you need to stop mutilating children. Is it just that the left, is it maybe that they have never felt the need to debate ideas, that they get so radicalized? Because really the thing that scares leftists the most are data and facts, and they'll never debate that. They want to debate everything on emotion. But if you try to debate them on reason, they'll walk away from it or they'll go back to demotion. To me, it just seems like these people aren't they're not serious intellectuals, one, but two, I think they're so devoid of any sort of moral clarity or centering philosophy that it's almost impossible for them to have a grasp or an understanding of what truth even is. And when they do debate, it's only with name calling and screaming and basically acting hysterical. Do you think that most people are aware of this, or do you think more Americans are waking up to it? I mean, what's going on exactly here?
Well, I think Americans are aware of it. The problem we have here is that although we are looking at sort of the post Kirk assassination time as a great revival in terms of faith, and that's wonderful, we have to also remember the political side to this. And there's a balance between honoring Charlie Kirk and his faith and what he was doing, but also realizing that we are in a place of political violence, and that's not going to necessarily be solved completely with just talking about it from a faith level, because the danger that we face, the danger from specifically transgender violence, which we know that the alleged shooter had a relationship with a transgender man. We know he was in that community of people, not he himself, but around others. We're in a period of time where we have to deal with practical issues, and I think that conservatives still don't know how to handle the transgender issue. It's not enough to simply say we know it's a problem and you should fight against it as parents. There's got to be another step. We have to figure out something else. And I don't want us to be sort of distracted in a lot of ways by our own want to move past this and to be happy again, to have jubilation, that we forget what's really happened. Because at the end of the day, Erica Kirk, Charlie's widow, after the memorial, after that, she goes home to an empty house. She goes home to a place where her husband is no longer there. And I think the sorrow of what happened also has to be given time, because people across the world, and specifically in this country, they can relate to the sorrow, to the loss. And I would like to see more conversation over the true cost of this. They took out somebody who was communicating to millions, who was a husband and a father who was only 31 years old. It's okay to say that things will be better, but we could also acknowledge the sorrow a little bit more.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's absolutely true. I do think people are motivated. We'll see how long that. Actually, I'm more optimistic about this. Hopefully, it'll last a very long time. I think Erica Kirk's highly motivated to make sure that Turning Point continues. They have a lot of great speakers and people not on the caliber of Charlie. He was irreplaceable, but like they say, you can go to every graveyard and find people that were irreplaceable. We're all replaceable in one sense, like we're all mortal. But I think his uniqueness and what he was able to do, and pretty much his ability to get people to engage with him on the left, which is very, very rare. They usually will not engage with people on the right. I think that's going to be incredibly hard to replace. That's why people are like, no one's going to replace him. But there can be millions of people that kind of continue on with his legacy. And I think in that way that's how you remember him. But yeah, you're right. It's true. Anytime you have a loss, sometimes the worst time of the loss is not like a week after or 2 weeks or everything going up to the funeral, because then you're still so focused on like the next step forward and the funeral and everything. It's kind of like, maybe a month or 2 months after when life's kind of returning to normal, but it's not really returning to normal. And I think Eric Kirk has a great faith. I think she'll stay consistent, and I think that's going to get her through this. I'm sure it'll be times that are up and down, but do you think maybe you want to, maybe what you're saying is you want to see more passion. You want to see people not have to feel bad because they're angry about this or they're sad about this. And we shouldn't just let's move on and remember them, which is what obviously we should do that too, but it's okay to also be very frustrated, upset, angry that people on the left pushed this for many, many years. And that's why we have the loss of Charlie Kirk.
Yes, I think that there's a balance we can have. I think that we can acknowledge both the joy that Charlie brought and the faith aspect of it, but we also need to not let people sort of inoculate themselves from the tragedy of what's happened, which I think could easily occur. Because the reality is, if this had happened to, I don't think there is a liberal sort of counterpart for Charlie Kirk, but let's say it's AOC. That's as close as I think you get. If this had happened to AOC, do you think that they would want us to be thinking about joy, Do you think that they would be blanketing themselves in hope or things, or do you think they would be telling the world that they are going to very strongly never forget this? I think there would be a sort of darker element to this, and I don't think we need to live in the darkness. But there's a great deal of mourning across this country, particularly from young people. And I think if we don't sort of acknowledge that, it will bubble up. And I think Turning Point has always been an organization that prioritizes hope and brightness and everything along those lines. We can do that, but we also need to recognize that they did a horrible thing. And I say they because this system of calling everyone a Nazi, of saying horrible things about people, and never expecting for anyone to be radicalized, the left is the one that does it. And I would like to see us acknowledge that more and not sort of get lost in our hopefulness.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's hopefully this is good, but you got to understand the evil that was done, and not just kind of get over it and move on. We've got to continue to have it as a rallying cry, press forward, and be okay with being angry. It's good to be angry. In fact, if you're not angry at evil, you're defying the word of God. It's good to be angry when people do horrible, terrible things, because that's not the kind of world we want to live in. So yeah, I completely agree with you. But we're about to take a quick break. We got more coming up about some of the news of the day with Magdalene. We'll be right back.
Exactly.
Anything I could ever put my finger on.
But for you, it's your work. It's this mission. And it might be sharing the gospel, and you have to find that perfect mix of it. And that's why I bring that up, is because the mission mindedness that I have, it would go too far one way, and I would work all the time. The relational mindedness that my wife has, it would go too far the other way, and we wouldn't have a dime to spare because we'd be vacationing down at the beach condo every other weekend, right? And so you have to bring those two things together, and the only way they're brought together, and you mentioned it, what is the point of the mission? Sharing the gospel, because that's the only thing that helps these two things correlate or coalesce appropriately.
Awesome. Let me jump into your team time a little bit. I want to hear about it just for a few. Time in the teams. Let me ask you first of all, why Navy? I mean, was that like the lifelong?
No.
I'm going to be a Navy SEAL.
No. I actually want to be an Army Ranger. How about that, right? Yeah. So, or a Marine sniper. Saw that movie with Tom Berenger. Remember that movie, Sniper, with Tom Berenger? I always wanted to be a sniper, Marine sniper, and then after seeing Black Hawk Down, I was like, I want to go be an Army Ranger.
Nice.
My dad took me down to recruiting office, and I was like, Dad, I'd become a firefighter. I was 18 at the time. I turned 19 before I actually went into the Navy. I said, hey, Dad, I think I need to do this. Dad just said, hey, if you're going to do something, not that military service is not special, but do something different. If you're going to go get a degree, get a master's degree. Go the whole route. If you're going to go to the military, do something special, do special operations. And Bush had just done the contract. You go Ranger, X-ray for the Green Beret, SEAL contract, PJ. So it was the SOCOM contract.
Call them SF babies.
Yeah, so when you're trying to up that number, so you don't have guys in the regular military going over, they're just trying to get anybody they can, get the top candidates. So I went and did that, and the hardest test, it was actually SEAL, Air Force for the PJ and the combat controllers. Then it was the Army for the X-ray, and then Ranger contract, or I think now it's called RASP, if I remember right, to actually go to battalion. And then finally was the Marine Corps had an 0311, 0311, their infantry contract, where you could go to screen for MARSOC after, I think, 1 year in the infantry. So somebody's probably listening. They could tell me where I'm wrong.
Were the Raiders standing up by then?
Yeah, they were. They had just, I think it was 2005 that they had started standing the MARSOC Raiders up out of Force Recon. Not Recon. Everybody's like, oh, Marine Recon. Recon is a regular infantry, battalion that do some, different things. But I'm talking about Force Recon, their Special Operations Command. You get a contract for any of those. And SEAL was the hardest. So I just said, all right, Lord, I'll do the SEAL, and if I pass that test, because I had to swim, the run was a little bit harder, had to do more pull-ups.
Were you a big swimmer before you got there?
No, not at all. I could.
Really?
I mean, I could swim. I wasn't going to drown if I fell in the lake, but I wasn't a swimmer. I didn't.
You weren't drown-proof to that point.
I was not drown-proof, and so I said, if I can pass this thing, that's the route I'll go. And it was physical, and then the written test. You had to score so high on your ASVAB, which is easy, and I did that, and I passed it, and I said, all right, Lord, I guess this is the route you want me to go. I got a contract. And, when I got the contract, I started training for 6 to 8 months, had nobody, didn't know any SEALs, didn't know anybody. I didn't know what to do, so I just kept running. I would run a lot. You know, I knew it was a lot of running. I was running probably 16 miles 2 times a week, and then in the other times I was running shorter distances, 3 and 4 miles every day a week, just training. Pull-ups, push-ups, sit-ups, doing that. My dad said, hey, you don't have to work. If you're going to go do this, good job, son. Live at my house, eat my food, and train and be ready. And then I'd go up to my buddy's lake house, and I would tread water with a boat anchor. I couldn't tread water with a boat anchor initially, but I got to where I could tread water with his boat anchor. You know, those little John boat anchors. There's not much weight, probably 15 pounds or something, maybe a little bit more than that.
Yeah, but.
And I would let it down with a rope, and I would tread water. As I'd pull that 20-foot rope up, I'd let it down to the bottom under his pier, and I'd pull it up, and I'd hold it over my head and tread, and then I'd let it back down, and that's what I would do. You can see he's over here laughing because I'm sitting here kicking my little feet like I'm doing it, right? And I would do that to train, and then a buddy of mine had a pool, and I would go swim in their pool every day of the week. I just swim laps back and forth.
I mean, how long was this self-training going on before you went down?
6 months, so it's, probably, about 6 months.
So what's
maybe a little bit longer.
I don't know the answer to this. What's the pipeline? So you took a SEAL contract, obviously.
Well, it's changed. It's changed a little bit now. So I'll tell you my pipeline, because the pipeline shifts it seems like it shifts every 2 years. I got a contract. I get slated for a time in the Navy, and then I have to pass the test to maintain the contract throughout the duration. So you go to MEPS just like anybody else does, went down to Montgomery, signed on, all that stuff. And 6 months, it might have been a little bit longer than 6 months, but they slate you for a time to leave for boot camp. So you don't leave immediately.
Delayed entry.
Yeah, so it's and it wasn't by choice either. It was just, hey, this is the time that we have.
You're listening to Rightside Radio. We've got Magdalene Rose on the line. We're going to have Phil on after this, but I want to talk about what you said earlier about why we need to be okay with being angry and sad and not just moving on, and we do want, I think it's great that a lot of people are praising God, revival. They talked about the gospel for 3.5 out of 5 hours yesterday and 100 million people saw that. I don't know the last time 100 million people saw a presentation of the gospel for that long. It's probably been 50 years. So there's a lot of good that's come from his death, but I do think we have to discuss what else is going on, because you got outlets like CNN, which the regular host is going to be on tonight with Abby Phillips. You guys definitely watch that. But CNN in general, not every show, but they do platform people like Crockett a lot. And she's been smearing Charlie. AOC's been smearing Charlie. And they've tried to, I don't know if it's the same stuff. He's a racist, sexist, homophobe. I mean, it doesn't matter. If Charlie ever only talked about tariff policy, they would have called him a racist, sexist, homophobe. For the left, if you just don't agree with him on any point, that's what they're going to say. But you'd think that after the political assassination, maybe they calm it down a little bit. I mean, we just found out Jimmy Kimmel is going to be back tomorrow night and to do a low-rated show. I'm sure some people will watch the beginning, but it's not going to change the dynamics. But do you think maybe the thing that should keep people motivated and angry is to realize that a lot of people on the left did not shed one tear when Charlie died. They shed tears of joy, because to them, when somebody that does good, that has a family, that lives a purposeful and meaningful life, when they die, they rejoice, because they're basically, I mean, I hate to say this, but the left lives very shallow, bitter, angry lives that are generally narcissistic and mean nothing and are almost never remembered. Do you think maybe the problem for the left is they look at Charlie as somebody that achieved so much and he started from basically nothing, and then maybe they reflect on themselves and they realize that their lives are devoid of any really deep or profound meaning? What are your thoughts?
I think that's true. And I think that one of the problems that we have is that the left looked at this, and no matter what they say, the vast majority of them looked at this in celebration. And then we held a memorial where we talked about the good works Charlie did in those things. So we spoke to the people who didn't know about conservatism, who didn't know about Charlie. We spoke to those people. We spoke to our own audience. But we didn't really address the people who say hateful things. We didn't really address the people who were happy about what happened. And to me, that's a problem. I think that Stephen Miller's speech, where he explained that there is darkness, and I think Marco Rubio's speech, for example, were very good. But there has to be something that is to me almost less lighthearted, because we're seeing like the conservative world come together, and that's wonderful. But we also have to talk about the root cause of why Kirk was assassinated, because we know that it's either general leftist indoctrination or specifically the transgender ideology in some shape or form, even if it's just sympathy for it. So I want to see the sort of pattern of indoctrination, if you will, for this young man, because if we can see that, we can see what the most dangerous parts of leftist ideology are. I think we already know them, but if we had confirmation over that, we'd have a mandate to investigate curriculum across the country in government-funded schools, to look at what's really being taught. The sort of pattern of indoctrination, to me, the pathway of it, is something that needs to be examined, and I don't want us to lose sort of the specific of understanding why this happened in the completely understandable haze of just trying to feel better because this awful thing has happened to us.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly very normal because you want to make something out of difficult events. I think that's a good thing. But you know, it really is frustrating. I saw a poll that showed something like 25% of people that identify as liberal think the world's better off without Charlie. I mean, people are like, well, it's only 25% of people on the left. I mean, that's what, 15% of people overall or something like that. And it's like, okay, well, that's 40 million people. That's more people than every standing army on earth combined, pretty much. So there's a lot of deviant people in this country. We've got to be honest about. I think that's another thing, like the trans ideology is just poison. It's poisonous. It's dangerous. We need to destroy it completely. Like we destroyed communism in the 90s, though it's making a comeback. I really think trans ideology is as dangerous as the ideology that ISIS or Al Qaeda was pushing 10, 20 years ago. But is that an overstatement? What are your thoughts?
No, I don't think so. And I think with transgender ideology in general, it is a toxic form of narcissism. And we know that, but we know that in conservatism. We know that it is narcissism because it is complete self-involvement. And if you don't agree with it, then you sort of get bludgeoned down metaphorically, sometimes physically, by the left. And I'll give you an example. I was at a restaurant and there was a man who was at least appeared to try to be a transgender woman. And he was very upset that they didn't have his order ready. And the behavior that went on, like the assuming that he was being discriminated against in a packed restaurant with a whole line of takeout orders at peak times on a Friday night, was ridiculous. And I think if you look at the comparison of if you go to a restaurant, your order isn't ready, you don't think it's because you're a Christian. You don't think it's because you're a man or a woman or anything, or even a minority. But this particular bit of narcissism that we see play out in daily life, it's very dangerous. And when young people come in contact with it, I think a lot of times they don't know how to deal with it, and it overwhelms them, and it brings them down this dangerous path. I want to know how this young man went from being raised in a Christian conservative home to the point where even the extended family is conservative, to allegedly assassinating Charlie Kirk because he was so hateful. I mean, that's what the text messages say, that he has to be stopped. That path of indoctrination must be studied.
Yeah, I think you're completely right. I mean, we study it. I think we kind of would mostly know the answer. Like leftist indoctrination is never good for the mind. It's never good for people. It always causes suffering and hardship and difficulty. But I do want to find out how pervasive it is. That's why I think Hash Patel and those guys need to take a serious look at this. We need to find out what the numbers are like, and are we likely to see another radicalized generation come very soon here? I think that's a great question. It's something we need to ask. All right, thank you so much, Magdalene. We're going to have Phil Williams on in just a second.
You to leave. And so I'm going through that process, and I have to continue to check into the NOSC or the little Navy area down there. Go and check in. I do my screener, make sure I maintain that contract, and went to the Navy and went through boot camp. When you're done with boot camp, it's like 3 months long or 3.5 months, whatever it is. Go through boot camp. In boot camp, you have extra, because I had a contract for NSW, you have an extra training in the morning. So
Naval Special Warfare, for those who don't know.
Yeah. So you go, NSW guys had to go and train early in the morning, swim and run and all that stuff at boot camp. So we got up earlier. Everybody gets up at 5, let's say, or whatever time it was. We get up at 3:30 or 4. go over, do an hour of training, come back. Everybody's up at 5, making their beds, getting ready for the day for your inspection, normal boot camp. So we had extra stuff at boot camp to keep us ready, albeit it didn't work that well. I got in worse shape in boot camp than I was when I got to boot camp. And once you're done with that, they had something called scruff duty. That's gone now, but scruff duty is where they hold you, and then they take guys and whoever's the top screeners get sent out to buds to class up in buds in San Diego. And this is in Chicago, Great Lakes, Illinois, where the Navy boot camp is. So after boot camp, went to scruff duty. I got picked up in the first rotation, and they send us out to San Diego, and there you check in, and you don't check into a class yet, because then they take the top screeners and they put them in the next class to sign, for buds indoc. It's not called indoctrination anymore, but at the time I was there, it was called indoctrination. And that's basically a couple weeks of prep for buds first phase, and you lose a lot of guys during that time. So that's the process. When I got out to San Diego, I classed up with class 264 and with indoc, made it through indoc, made it into first phase, and it's constantly a selection process. So out of the Southeast, they took out of a couple hundred guys that screened, 10 of us actually wound up going to buds and maintaining that contract. And then when you get into scruff duty, there's a couple hundred guys there. There might have been 300 guys at scruff duty. Well, they took 50 of those guys that were the top screeners and sent them out to San Diego. So I was in that first run, and a lot of my buddies were sent them out to San Diego. And in San Diego, you might have a couple hundred guys waiting to class up, and they'll take however many of those guys to fill that next class. So they're always selecting, taking the top performers, because, again, they're trying to get more numbers through. The percentage still stayed the same as failure rate, but they're just trying to get more numbers into the teams. And so I classed up with 264, 366 guys with buds indoc. And by the time we graduated buds, I think only 11 originals graduated. Wow. And of the 11 originals that graduated, of 32 guys that I started with actually got tridents. I was one of those guys. I didn't graduate until class 267. So you get rolled for injury, performance, maybe both. I got rolled, and in 267 is when I actually graduated buds and SQT.
Yeah, we call that recycle in the Army.
Yeah, that's it. You're just getting recycled, but you only get one shot to recycle, and they might hold you 2 or 3 classes for your injury to heal, or whatever it is, but they'll throw you back into a class, and you have certain staples. So Hell Week is one. If you make it through Hell Week, you don't have to go through Hell Week again. If you make it through pool competency in the second phase, you don't have to go through pool comp again. If you make it, and then third phase, you'll have to start over.
Are there ancillary? I mean, in the Army, we call them special schools, like additional special schools. And I actually had some Rangers some SEALs in my Ranger class.
Yeah. So
did you go to airborne school? Did you go to? What else
so we go to jump school because we're all Halo, Hey-Ho qualified, all that. So, but we had our own jump school. Because the Army.
So you're not at Fort Benning going through jump school doing that?
No, the guys used to. But when they set the requirement that all SEALs be Halo, Hey-Ho qualified, we stood up our own jump school right there in San Diego at Brownfield, and we did all of our static line there. I've only got like 5 or 6 static line jumps, and then a couple hundred, free fall jumps. There's some guys that really get into it. They have thousands of free fall jumps, especially guys over at development group that jump a lot. Now we spent a lot of time in the wind tunnel and did a lot of that, but.
Hey, all you Rightside ruffians out there, you are listening to Rightside Radio, solid conservative, just plain right.
You're listening to Rightside Radio. This is Chris Reed from the Daily Controversy filling in, but we do have Phil Williams, who's going to be on CNN tonight with Abby Phillips. I know that's going to be really exciting for you. You like going into the Lion's Den. I guess Scott's taking a night off tonight, so they're going to let you fill in for him. Tell us a little bit about that and how excited you are, because I heard you got Cornell West, and he's a very rational, thoughtful man. So that you lucked out on that one.
Yeah, man, it's going to be a hoot tonight. Once more into the breach, my friends. Hey, how's everybody doing, by the way? Good to hear y'all's voice up here in the big city. But yeah, I'm going to be on Newsnight with Abby Phillip tonight at 9 p.m. Central Time. And the panel they've got me on has got Kevin O'Leary, who, is probably going to be my only kind of ally on the panel. And then, of course, Abby Phillip hosts it. And then we've got Anna Navarro from The View and Cornell West. And my God, so it's gonna be something. Every time I've seen Cornell West, all he does is start shouting racism no matter what you say. So we'll see where it goes.
Honestly, though, if I had to pick between a conversation with Cornell West or Anna Navarro, I would definitely pick Cornell West. Not that I like Anna Navarro is very like she always shifts the conversation away from what you're actually talking about to emotion, and she yells and she gets very like crazy, and she's got those like kind of like big AOC eyes too. Don't let that distract you. She's trying to argue with you. So and in the break, you told me that the Charlie Kirk was not technically as on the topics, and it's like we just had a 5-hour memorial with 100 million people that watched it, and it's not even a topic of conversation, like not even on the potential topics you guys are gonna. I'm sure it'll come up, but it seems like that would be
they want to talk about why they think that Pam Bondi is on the outs, Tom Homan took a bribe, and and Jimmy Kimmel's getting his show back. That's what they want to talk about. So I'm prepared to go to battle on any of those. But it's and I'm gonna find a way to talk about yesterday if I can, because to me it was a watershed moment. I mean, it was a revival moment, and anybody who wants to deny the level to which I think that God was glorified in all that was said and done yesterday is just got their head in the sand.
Yeah, I mean, 100 million people. I mean, 3.5 of the hours out of 5, we were probably just straight up gospel. And I mean, like, not vague niceties that you normally would hear from politicians, but like really, like, Christ died for our sins so that we could be free from them. Like he wants us to repent so that we can change. And like it was great. I mean, the pastors were great. Chris Tomlin did a good job. I even think the guys that were more like exciting, Jack Boswick and Stephen Miller did a good job. But really, it was an amazing moment, because this is like a Super Bowl, and a lot of people that had never gone to church, or maybe had gone 20 or 30 years, they came to church after Charlie died, and this is probably the second week that they've come. And I think that's what he wanted more than anything. Like, he wanted a political change, but he wanted a cultural and spiritual revival, spiritual more than anything. So I think he would be well pleased with the fact that so many people got to hear about the gospel, and so many people are returning to the church. And hopefully this has a massive impact on the public for generations to come. I know you're part of a vigil. Tell us about what you saw, because there are vigils all over the world. But what were some things that you saw, and were there a lot of young people there?
Yeah, I mean, so two things here. One is JP and I were both at an event yesterday. I don't know if y'all talked about this or not in Decatur. There were probably 400 or 500 people there at Frederick's Outdoors in Decatur. Myself, Congressman Barry Moore, Chairman John Wall from the State Republican Party, and then Brylan Hollyhand, who has now been tapped to be TPUSA's next ambassador. He's going to be doing the next 10 campuses of the tour that Charlie Kirk was killed doing. And so you talk about something else. I mean, there's a young college kid who said, I just watched my mentor be murdered, and I'm going to go do it too. And he's stepping out. So one of the things that really struck me yesterday was watching that and realizing there's an 18-year-old kid who has the chutzpah to say, send me, I will go. And I thought that was amazing. I did see, though, there were a lot of young people in the audience. There were a lot of families in our audience. And then we also live streamed. We actually started our event late because they had a giant Jumbotron live streaming the Arizona event. And I'll tell you what really got me, aside from the fact that it had the same makeup, just 1,000 times bigger, was the fact that we had the leaders of our nation standing up on stage and giving glory to God. I mean, to me, they all did an amazing job, some at different levels. The one who really stood out to me, just because it was so dynamic, was Marco Rubio. My word, he came across so incredibly passionate and just on the money. So yeah, I think it's pretty amazing.
Yeah, and we need people to step up, and I think we're going to see that. C.S. Lewis, during the later part of his life, he said, "My prayer is that when I die, all of hell rejoices that I am out of the fight." And I really think that's kind of what we saw with Charlie. Like the most ghoulish, demonic, evil people were delighting that he was out of the fight. But I thought that was a great credit to him. Like, just think about that. You've got the most evil people on earth that hate God, they hate Christianity, with all of their hearts, and they're screaming out in joy that he died. I'm like, man, I would love to have that kind of impact when I die, that the most evil people on earth are excited about it. Like, I feel like if I've ever achieved that, then I've achieved everything I could ever hope for. And that's why, like, it's sad to see it, because these are American citizens and they're celebrating the death of a husband and father. But these people are wicked, wicked and evil. And I hope they repent. I hope they change. And I hope they be like some of the people at TPUSA who used to be very liberal. Now they're conservative. I really hope they do. But what are your thoughts on that? That it is actually a credit to Charlie Kirk that some of the most horrible people on earth are excited that he died.
Yeah, well, so yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, if 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 Satan's on his heels, then that means that Jesus is being made known. And I would say that Charlie did an amazing job, and I think that a lot of people felt like his legacy was conservatism, and conservative public policy, and getting a dynamic younger generation to the polls to vote Republican. But I think his legacy is proven to be far bigger than that. And I wish I had realized to the extent during his lifetime of his faith-based effort being first and foremost in all that he did, because you're right. I mean, there are people out there crowing about him being gone, and those are exactly the kind of people that you want to know that you had ticked off, because if they weren't ticked off, then you hadn't done anything. If they loved you, I mean, I've heard it said before, if Satan's not poking at you, then that means you're walking in the same direction with him. So the bottom line is, Charlie Kirk left behind a legacy, and it was way bigger than politics.
Yeah, you're completely right. I mean, he left behind a legacy for hundreds of millions of people. I mean, I think millions of people knew about him. And it's funny, a lot of the guys in my discipleship group, church, like, it's amazing how many of the ones between the ages of maybe 39 to 18, like, how profound an impact that Charlie Kirk had on them. I didn't even know this until he died. And it was like, people were in tears. It was amazing. Even my producer in Huntsville, like, he's mainly apolitical, but he said, man, this is one of the hardest things watching him die. It was I used to listen to him. It's like losing somebody that you feel like and I saw that with Gen Z, and now what I've seen is a lot of their parents or even their grandparents have seen the videos, and so now an entire new generation has been introduced to Charlie Kirk, who maybe never would have over the last 11, 12 days. And that's probably why at the vigil, you probably saw, like, young families, young people, but you probably saw older people and grandparents and all these people that have now found out who Charlie Kirk was.
I would agree with that. I think there's been quite an awakening to the things he stood for, but also to who he was. And it's so impressive to watch the way he advocated for family, and I would say Christ-centered family. He didn't make any bones about it. His family was next to his relationship with the Lord. His family was the most important thing out there, and they would say that about him. In fact, they did say that about him. His wife Erica has done just. I mean, I cannot imagine, by the way, being her in her position. I mean, 10 days after my spouse was murdered, being able to speak like she did, and maintain such poise and decorum, and get through it all. But I think it's because what they had was so genuine that she needs to make sure the world hears about it. So yeah, a whole lot there to unpack. But I think yesterday was a defining moment. I think it's one of those things that it's going to be remembered for years and years to come.
Yeah, and I certainly hope it's a moment that we look back on as a like people said, turning point for the nation because we need people to get married and have kids and get involved in their Bible believing churches. I mean, that's you want to understand like the problems that we have. I mean, a lot of it is there's a lot of economic problems, there's debt and all these things. But if you really think about it, if let's say 95% of people grew up in stable nuclear families with loving parents, our debt would be nearly zero because there's not really a lot of debt that comes because you don't need social programs for the most part, and except in rare exceptions for short term, when you have mostly like stable, loving homes outside of major disabilities, things of that nature. But it does seem like our biggest problem as a nation is not like we talk about debt and deficit and all this stuff, but really that wouldn't even be an issue if you had 95% of homes being stable, loving, because most of where the entitlement spending goes is not to people from stable homes. It's from people that grew up with single moms or from difficult circumstances. But if you fix the nuclear family, everything is basically fixed. At least that's what Charlie believed. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, and I'll tell you what, too. I in my comments last night, my portion of last night's program was to speak for a few minutes about family, and I said that one of the closing comments I said on that was, aside from giving some thoughts on it and giving it some scriptural basis for it, was that there's a lot of people in this audience, and I know it. There's a lot of people in this listening audience right now, and I know it, who don't have any idea what it means to have stable family. You didn't grow up with it. You're not sure you'll ever have it of your own. And my call to you is break the mold. Realize that you are not bound to what the generation before you did or did not do. Break the mold and be determined. I come from a broken family. I come from being a dysfunctional kid. I am someone who had all the reasons in the world not to have a loving, stable family. And I'll tell you right now, my wife of nearly 40 years is amazing, and I can't imagine life without her. We raised two great kids. We now have grandkids. And I was determined to not repeat some processes in my adult life. And so I would just challenge everybody to understand that Christ first in your household and be intentional with it. You can break the mold. Do not think you can't. That stable family is yours for the building.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the only way we're going to get better because people are going to have to break the mold and make make those choices that you're talking about. And praise God because He's about redemption, reconciliation. But let's take a quick break.
There you go.
And I want to talk to you about your show tonight, just what the audience can expect, and some of the topics that we mentioned earlier. We'll be right back.
And we had a whole air ops thing that we stood up at Team 3 where we would jump in with stuff, and you can do advanced schools later, but a requirement to be a SEAL is to pass jump school, free fall school. And some guys wouldn't pass it. Some guys make it through BUD/S and then they fail jump school.
That was one of the dreams I never got to go do.
Yeah. Free fall?
By the way, is that still considered like a primary insertion technique for the teams? Is that?
No, I wouldn't say it's a primary insertion technique. There's some guys that have inserted into combat situations in Africa primarily via jumps, halo jumps or HAO jumps. The only ones I ever did was training, and so it wasn't really needed because we're at war in the country we were in, so we didn't have to jump in.
So all right, I see the pipeline. I see you got trained. Let me ask you this real quick before I move on to deployments. So Ranger School for me, I went and it was all about patrolling and small unit tactics and and mountaineering and whatever else and swamp operations, and which was miserable and all those things were they were real.
Where'd y'all do your swamp stuff at? Mississippi?
No, down in Florida.
Oh, in Florida? Okay.
Yeah, Eglin Air Force Base. But that being said, later I realized I think more than anything I learned things about me.
Yeah.
And I gained stuff that was not necessarily what I would call military.
Yeah.
It was more along the lines of things that it did to me, for me, and taught me about me.
Yeah.
What about you with BUD/S and the rest?
Yeah, I mean, it's I guess the most concise way I can say it is, again, a scriptural principle. David says, "You knit me in my mother's womb." God made you who you were before you were even born. He knew you, he knit you, he put you on this world for a certain purpose. And the New Testament tells us so that he's placed every man in his time and his specific dwelling so that he might reach out and find God. So he placed us here to find him, to be able to see this is who God is, right? The Godhead, God the Father, God the Son, God the Holy Spirit. So I do believe that aspect of it, but he made you a certain way, right? He made you to find him, but he also made you a certain way to share him with the world around. I don't believe, what I've learned is I don't believe everybody's like, oh yeah, they trained you that way in BUD/S, or they trained you that way to be a SEAL. No, that's not what they're doing. Notice everything I've talked about is a selection process. It's a constant selection process. And even once you get there, once you get to a SEAL team, once you get to in an instructor role, once you get to, development group for the guys that go special mission unit, it's still a selection process for those individuals. Even once they make it there, you have to continually perform. And I would say that for me, that's what it taught me. They don't train you to do anything. I mean, they train you in some ways. They hone you, make you better. But the end goal, especially for BUD/S, is to find, is this the individual that we want to become a SEAL?
Yeah.
For sniper school, is this the individual that we want to become a sniper? I'm already a sniper, right? They just find me. I'm already a SEAL. They just find me. I'm already a Tier 1, a Special Mission Unit SEAL, Development Group SEAL. They just find me. Does that make sense? And that's all of their processes that they're doing in every aspect. Then you get out of the SEAL teams. I'm already an operator, but the CIA finds me for the specific thing they want, or the DIA finds me for the specific thing that they want. They don't really teach you to become anything.
Who was it? Was it maybe Michelangelo who said that the art that he is sculpting is already in the stone? And I'm super paraphrasing.
He just reveals it.
He just reveals it.
That's exactly
his job is to bring it out.
I would say that's the biggest thing that I've learned is that individual, wherever you're at, wherever you're at within your community, or whatever, that individual is already there. For me in the SEAL teams, I was already a SEAL. They just found me, and there's not many guys. That's why we have such a high attrition rate, right? And then you go to the next step, like sniper school. That's why we have such a high attrition rate at sniper school. These guys are SEALs, but they're not a sniper. That's why you have such a high attrition rate in development group for the guys that go over SEAL Team 6. These guys are already SEALs. They're top-level operators. But we need something different for this. Does that make sense?
It does.
So that's kind of the flow. And that's probably what it taught me, is that everything is finding out, are you the person that can be this? Not training you to be the person to be that, which I find interesting because, again, it's a scriptural principle.
Yeah.
And oftentimes I think we find problems in this world. We either desire to be things that we weren't made to be. We shouldn't do that, right? It's the guy with the 1 talent, the 5 talents, and the 10 talents.
A boy's outside his gifts.
Yeah, that's right. If you're outside your gifts, you don't desire to be something that you weren't made to be.
Yeah.
And be the best thing that you can be. It doesn't matter if it's a dang garbage truck driver. My granddaddy, he's a farmer. He loves farming. He loves digging in the dirt. And I was at his house this morning, and that's what he was going over, showing me his plants that he built a little greenhouse for. It's a piece of plastic draped over some cross ties.
You're listening to Rightside Radio. This is Chris Reed from Daily Controversy. We got Phil Williams on the line. He's going to be on CNN tonight at 9 p.m. Central Time with Abby Phillips. It's going to be a great show, although we were just talking about how they don't have Charlie Kirk as one of the topics. One topic, though, is Jimmy Kimmel. And before you got on, we talked a little bit about consequence culture. Of course, we had to change that after they decided to, Disney went back on the firing of Jimmy Kimmel. Now, this is what I don't get. Disney is a publicly traded company. Therefore, they have a fiduciary duty to shareholders to maximize profit. Over the last 5 years, their stock has been pretty bad. For 40 years, it was amazing. They've had 4 or 5 major flops in the last 5 years. They had 1 flop 40 years before that. This seems to be a very stupid move by Disney, because even if they bring him back, that might appease the leftists for a little while, but he's still losing, $30 to $60 million a year. Their company's not nearly what it was many years ago. So to me, it's not a question of okay, well, they can bring him back. Fine. I think that really sends the wrong message. I also think the fact that somebody, shot up an ABC 10 in Sacramento and they changed their mind makes it look like they were motivated by, maybe somebody doing something terrible. I think that's bad. But Phil, what do you think about this? Because Disney's underlying numbers are not good. The numbers for Kimmel are awful. And again, bringing him back, it's more liability and risk and no profit. So what's going on here?
I think it's a variety of things. I think number one, they probably have a contract issue they had to deal with, and they recognize that they could be in an open contract dispute with one of their very visible hosts. They chose not to go that route. They've always said that his show was suspended indefinitely. They didn't say it was gone. They just said suspended indefinitely. And I think basically he got the equivalent of being sent to his room without supper and told to think about what he's done. I do believe that what's going to wind up happening now is Kimmel's probably going to come out and have to be contrite and have to recognize that they do have a fiduciary obligation to not only the shareholders, but to their subsidiary or affiliate stations. I mean, we had Sinclair and Nexstar just like saying, take him off of our shows. He does not represent our hometowns that we broadcast in. And I think what you're going to wind up seeing here is a Jimmy Kimmel 2.0 who's going to come out a little bit contrite, and he's going to have the opportunity to fall on his face and either pull his ratings back up by actually being funny again, or he's going to go away. A comedian is supposed to have several things at play at all times: good content, good delivery, and timing. And he was failing on all three with those cracks he made that were just. And by the way, they were not a joke. It was a lie. And it was gross about Charlie Kirk's death. And they realized that they had just stepped in it by keeping him on the air. So now they're hoping they can bring him back and do a mea culpa, and we'll wait and see. But I think him coming back is tenuous at best.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a gambling man, but if I was, I would take bets that this whole contrite Jimmy Kimmel is probably, I could see him coming back on and saying he was going to apologize and then just blowing up at MAGA again, which I think Disney at that point would just toss him, because then there's like, oh, this is just going to be damaged forever, so there's no point. I just haven't seen anything in Jimmy Kimmel that would make me believe that he is capable of sincerity and contriteness. Now, maybe he's capable of saying whatever needs to be said in order to protect his financial interest. I could definitely see people that can do that. But as far as Jimmy Kimmel, like being willing to, I don't know, change his mind or admit he was wrong, do you honestly think he's going to come on the air tomorrow night and he's going to say, you know what, guys, what I did was wrong and I feel terrible about it and it caused the Kirk family a lot of pain? I don't see it. Maybe he will, but I just, for the life of me, I just can't see Jimmy Kimmel deciding to do that. What is he going to say then?
No. And I know you only got like 30 seconds left, but I'll tell you what I think is going to wind up happening. He's going to come back on. The ratings are going to be in the tank. A lot of people who've hung in there on the show are going to bail on it now. And I don't think he'll ever regain the ground he has. And I think his show is doomed.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you. I think the show was doomed a long time ago, because he's been going down on the ratings for so long. It's been amazing. And so is Colbert. And the only reason Jimmy Fallon continues the show is because he actually has decent numbers when it comes to his YouTube. So he's been able to get to monetize social media quite well for the company. But Kimmel's a whole other animal. He doesn't do that well. His ratings are terrible. He's not funny, like you said, number one. And it's every single quarter, it's down. The last 2 months, he's down 10%. It's amazing when you get this low too. All right. Well, thank you so much, Phil. It was so great guest hosting your show. Have a great time in New York City. And everybody remember to tune in at 9 o'clock on CNN to watch Phil on the Abby Phillips Show.